My name is Richard Furr, and
Yes, come and join and get cloud hired. I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
Hey, Go Cloud Architect family. I'm Cloud Hired.
So, I'm cloud hired, guys.
So I'll just say I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired thanks to Go Cloud Architects.
It worked for me, and now I'm cloud hired.
Because of Go Cloud Architect program, I am Cloud Hired. See!
I am cloud hired. Thank you, Mike and the Glowcloud team.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Michael Gibbs. I'm joined here by Mark Milovanovic, and we're here today to help you build your technology career. I remember when I started my career, my architect career 25 years ago as a network architect, and I was leaving healthcare. It felt like everything I was doing was wrong. I got a certification here, a certification here, a certification there. In the end, guess what? No one cared. And it was only when I got some expert guidance that I knew exactly what to learn. And poof, I was hired practically overnight. Within 2 years, I was a principal architect. And the key was I had really good guidance. So one of the things we love to do with Go Cloud Careers is come online once or twice per week, completely free, and answer your tech career questions. Because, I've spent more than 20 years guiding people into their career. Mark has been helping people for a long time as well. And we want you to have the best technology career. And you can either learn by making a mistake, do this, make a mistake, do this, make a mistake, and learn. Or you can basically ask people that have already made it. And instead of making mistakes, just go straight up to your goals. So that's why we're here. So bring us your tech career questions so we can help you in your career. Before we begin, let's talk about some free things we're going to do to help you in your technology career. In a few weeks, we're going to run a completely free AWS Solutions Architect Bootcamp. We will cover the Solutions Architect Associate curriculum, all of it. We will cover some of the AWS Advanced Networking, some of those key things that you need to know. Some of those AWS security things that they put in their advanced security that are basic security, we'll pop them in there as well. We'll even cover the new machine learning services and artificial intelligence services with AWS because, that's all the buzz now. And there's a lot of money and momentum behind there, and we want to know that you know it. And it'll be live. We'll teach, you can ask questions. There'll be a tremendous number of labs, and it has about 3 times the content of previous courses that we're running for the Solutions Architect Associate Bootcamp, because normally we run them for architects, and this one should be helpful to cloud architects, cloud engineers, cloud administrators, and everyone. We wanted to expand upon our free training for you. So please sign up. It's free. On Thursday this week, we have a webinar on how to get your first cloud architect job. I have to tell you, after getting people hired as cloud architects at, say, Apple and Amazon now, and Cisco and IBM and Google and Microsoft and Accenture, Deloitte, KPMG, Capgemini, PricewaterhouseCoopers, Barclays Bank, JP Morgan Chase Bank, Zscaler, Palo Alto Networks, any prestigious organization, we've trained people and they work there. And they work there because we actually know what architects are because we've been architects for decades, and we teach actual architect skills as opposed to skills from other people's careers. And that's why people hire our students. And if you know what the right skills are, whether you're with us or on your own, you can learn those skills. And that's the secret to getting hired, is having the right skills for the job. So join us in this free webinar. We'll talk about what we do as cloud architects versus what people think we do. We'll talk about the real skills you need to be a cloud architect versus the skills people think you need that have never been architects before. We'll talk about how you can skip HR auto rejecting you so you can get an interview and prove your competency to the hiring manager to get hired. We'll cover it all, and it's all free. And of course, we'll spend about 60 to 90 minutes after giving that discussion, and you can ask questions, and we'll do anything we can to help you in your career, and it's a completely free session, so please sign up. And also, in the description of this video, there are a tremendous number of documents to help you in your career. One of them is on how to get your first cloud architect job, and that's the one I'm telling you about, but there's a lot more there, so go get some free stuff and do better in your career. So, please bring us your questions, because, you don't bring us your questions, there's no way we can help you. I've now helped people for more than 2 decades. Get the first tech job, get promoted in tech. And I've held pretty much every technology career you can think of, from a network architect to an enterprise architect to a cloud architect to a business architect, security architecture, you name it, I've done it all. And Mark is an expert network architect. We're both CCIEs. And Mark, you want to say a few words and encourage people to ask some questions?
Oh, of course, I'd be delighted. I wanted to welcome everybody. Very warm welcome. We're always excited to be here with you. It is our way of being able to give back to the community. And we hope by sharing an hour or two with you every week, at least when it comes to this type of format, that you can ask your questions. It doesn't matter if they're related to business, if they're related to technology, or just in general, how you can move forward within something very specific when it comes to your career. I know Mike feels the same way, just like I have. There's been times in our career where we felt lost. We didn't really have any guidance on trying to figure out where we might go. Fortunately, we did not have any horrendous difficulties when it comes to obstacles in our ways. They're going to tear us down, discourage us, but there were still obstacles. There were still mistakes that we made. So being able to share some time with you every week is one of the highlights that we get to do. Now, business aside, this is something that we enjoy doing, and we hope that everybody takes advantage of it. Propose us your questions, and I hope you have some wonderful questions. We're always excited to answer them for you. All right, first question from Adam123. Hey, Mike, thanks for answering my question earlier this week. So I'm new to cloud, and I think I'd like to work towards becoming an architect. Can you share some tips or guidance?
Adam123, absolutely. So let me tell you what a cloud architect actually does. Because if I tell you what we do, and I'll tell you what, architects will tell you we do, and that's what I'm going to initially tell you. And the next thing I'm going to do is tell you what CIOs say that they're looking for when they hire. And that'll come out of CIO Magazine. So what do we do as our cloud architects? The first thing we do is work with the executive team of an organization to find their goals for the business. Now, this is the exact opposite of what people think we do. They think we just design stuff and then offer it to our clients. No, we need to find the goals and vision for the business. After we understand the business goals and business vision, the next thing that we need to understand is the business architecture. How does that organization operate? How does the business actually work? The business processes, etc. And then we have to work with the client to help re-architect or redesign the business processes based upon the future goals of the business, because how you do the work determines, whether you meet the business's goals or not. Now, after we understand how the business operates, and we've worked with the organization to re-architect the business processes, now we need to look at their networking, we need to look at their data center, we need to look at their data, we need to look at all their technology. And that whether it's in the private cloud, public cloud, hybrid cloud, multi-cloud, we need to look at their application security, even voice video systems. We need to baseline them and say, will the current technology platform get the organization to its future goals and support its future business processes? And if the answer is no, the next thing we need to do is create an architecture team. And that architecture team will be people from a wide variety of audiences. If I'm a cloud architect, I'm going to bring in some network architects. I'm going to bring some security architects in. I'm going to bring some IAM architects in. I'm going to bring some AI architects to focus on AI. I'm going to bring in some data scientists. I'm going to bring in some cloud engineers to make sure that what we design is actually going to work and get them for the deep tech input. I'll bring in some developers. I'll bring in some DevOps engineers. So together, me as an architect, I lead this team. Now, after I lead this team, we also need to create a documentation of the solution, present it to the client, build the business case around it. Then we often typically will create a team that will help implement the solution, because remember, a cloud architect's not a hands-on position. We don't code, we don't configure, we don't touch the technology. We will also have to help work with the organization to create a team, the people that are going to govern the implementation and then govern the overall long-term solution. At this point, we're going to have to lead a team of stakeholders to get their buy-in so they will adopt and support the new systems. And of course, we'll help create a strategy when changes occur. Now, that's what architects will tell you they do. That's also relatively in line with the steps of TOGAF or any other enterprise architecture type framework. Now, so many people were confused with what is a cloud architect, and they were learning things like Python and DevOps and SysOps and development. And then they went on architecture interviews and the person asked them to design something or build a business case. And the person was like, huh? Because they trained for somebody else's career. So, and you can see this in CIO Magazine. My team will pop a link to this. When they ask CEOs what are the 3 main responsibilities of a cloud architect, they say leading the cultural change for cloud adoption, developing and coordinating a cloud architecture, and developing a cloud strategy and coordinating the adoption process. Leading the cultural change for cloud adoption is what I talked about when I said managing stakeholders and understand the business process and getting buy-in. Developing and coordinating the architecture is what I meant when I said I have to go build a team of subject matter experts and I have to coordinate and facilitate the team design of the architecture. And developing the cloud strategy, that is, do we want to go single cloud, hybrid, multi-cloud, hybrid, multi-cloud? Do we want to be private cloud and scale out to the public cloud or burst because it gives us better performance at lower costs? And then we have to figure out, the adoption of it. Now, other things that we may do that the CIOs said they would like their architects to do, and this is exactly what I've done for the last 25 years as an architect, is helping to find talent with the necessary skill, assessing the organization's application software and hardware, creating a cloud broker team, establishing best practices for the cloud across the company, selecting cloud providers and vetting third-party services, overseeing governance and mitigate risk, working closely with the IT security people to monitor privacy and develop incident response procedures, manage budgets and estimate cost, and operate at scale. So what is that really telling you? That's predominantly what we do. So this is 2/3 business, 1/3 tech as a rule. So what do we need for this? We need to be good leaders. We need to be good communicators. We need to be able to bring out the best in others. We need to be able to sell a solution, manage stakeholders, manage vendors, and we need to communicate to the C-suite. So we need to be relevant to that C-suite. And we need to understand business and business process re-engineering if we're going to help a client re-architect business processes. So they're the business skills we need. Now, we have to be able to design the technology, and you can't design what you don't understand. So you have to learn how the technology works, which is exactly the opposite of learning how to build the technology. You will not learn, sadly enough, how the technology works by building it. And that's why the people that build the buildings don't get asked to design shopping malls or the buildings themselves. Building teaches you building, design teaches you design. So if you were going to build a skyscraper or design a skyscraper, for example, in Dubai, and it's going to be 2,000 meters tall, you'd have to think about the density of the ground, for example. You'd have to think about the velocity of the wind that it would get. You'd have to think about the weight that the foundation would need to support, for example. That's architecture calculations, right? The engineers would be determining how to use that hammer, nail, screwdriver, or cement and pour it. I'm sorry, the builders in this case. So that's what the builders would do versus the architects. It's the same thing for the architect. You need to learn the cloud. And what I mean by the cloud? The network and the data center, because all cloud computing is Atom 1, 2, 3 is running space in somebody else's network in a data center. So all the same stuff, the servers, the containers, the storage area networks, the databases, the firewalls, the IDS, IPS systems, the VPN concentrators, it's all the same stuff. So instead of learning how to configure it, and I have no problem you learning how to configure it if it makes you feel good. I learned how to configure it. Unfortunately, it didn't teach me how to design anything, but it was fun, and I enjoyed it. So there's nothing wrong with it, and it supported my learning. It didn't hurt my learning. It just took focus away from what I was trying to learn, which was how to design systems. So you've got to learn these things. So what are they? There are things like, what kind of wide area network technology do you pick when you go to the cloud? You have to be able to reach your systems if they're on the cloud. You can't just put them out there without a network. So you need to be able to think about the strengths and weaknesses of, say, a private line or a software-defined WAN or a SASE WAN or a traditional VPN. And then when you get to that cloud, you need to be able to think about the networking of cloud, the IP addressing, the route aggregation sort of things. You know, you need to be able to be thinking about BGP and how you're going to engineer or design your traffic to go through the system. You need to be thinking about your servers and server virtualization. That means understanding servers, understanding processors, understanding, their compute capability and DRAM and what you actually need. Because you're going to have to figure out how to move a system from one size to another size. You're going to have to understand that. Same thing with containers and container orchestration. You're going to have to understand, what a container is, how a container works, how are the containers orchestrated via something like, say, Kubernetes, for example. And then you need to understand, which one of these things would you choose? Could you use a cloud provider's managed Kubernetes, or do you need something more generic like IBM OpenShift? If you have multiple clouds, you're not going to use Amazon EKS because, what happens if the Amazon cloud goes down and you're in 3 clouds? Well, you got a bit of a problem. But if you use a more traditional Kubernetes environment like OpenShift, you're good. Then you need to be able to think about, databases and how do they work? How do they store their data? What are their strengths, their weaknesses, their limitations? How to scale them? How to make them more available? As opposed to how to run an SQL query. That's somebody else's job. So it's about knowing what you can do with queuing and horizontal scaling with things like read replicas, caching, those types of things for your architectural design. It's the same thing as it pertains to designing for security. You're not going to be using those cloud native tools. You're going to be using enterprise grade security technology plus some of the little bit of the cloud native tools, and you're going to have to know how to use them together for maximum functionality. So that's the key. So join us on the free webinar on Thursday. We'll cover the exact full list of skills. But remember, this is a planning job. To be good at a planning job like architecture, you need to study planning and you need to understand the underlying technology and get the businesses. Now, if you wanted to be an engineer, it would be the exact opposite plan. Again, engineer, architect, one's not better than the other. They're both critically important. One designs the system, one builds them. But where 99% of the people go wrong in their architecture careers, they learn engineering. And then they go on an interview. And someone like Mark interviews them and they say, our organization's weighted average cost of capital is this. How would you think about that when you consider a Nutanix or an OpenStack cloud versus a public cloud like AWS? And the person doesn't know. Or how would you design our demilitarized zone for a mission critical web app? And the person doesn't know. Or how would you design a remote access environment for an organization that has 300,000 employees? Or how would you ensure data sovereignty for a military unit? They just don't cover that, and you don't learn that by building it. You have to study by design. But Adam 1, 2, 3, here's the good news. It doesn't matter your background. You can be anyway. You could be Pierre Dassault, who worked on sailboats before we trained him, before he got hired at LeaseWeb in Canada as a solution architect. You could be like Al Legister. God, this guy was a great guy. We had fun. He was a sales rep in consumer products, and he left our organization as a senior solutions architect with Deloitte. You could be like Balwinder Kerr, who was a stay-at-home mom who was hired by Microsoft. You could be like Delroy Batt, who was working on ambulances before he got hired by CDW as a security architect. Or Jennifer Ema, who was a mental health tech who got hired by JP Morgan Chase as their first tech job as a solutions architect. So it doesn't matter where you begin. It matters that you have the right skills, attitude, energy, enthusiasm, communication skills, leadership skills, executive presence. You have that, you can go anywhere. Love to see you in that webinar.
Yeah, and I can't stress how many golden nuggets Mike just dropped for you guys. He only gave you somewhat of a partial list in regards to the skill sets that are going to be necessary to acquire, to learn. So these are things you can learn. You're not born with them, right? So training, proper training is what you need. But if you don't remember, if you didn't write them down, go back when the recording becomes available, write down what Mike just said, join us on Thursday, because he really broke down what it means to be an architect. And the beauty about this is if you can accumulate those skills and train them up, and I'll even give you a little bit of a percentage that I think might even help you. I would probably focus anywhere from 65 to 70% of my time on what we consider the soft skills. Those are all the business critical skills that you'll need. Those will include your communication skills, your leadership skills. This will include your writing and communication skills. And then the remaining about 30%, focus on the tech. And the reason I say that is, if you can learn how to communicate properly, if you can present to somebody the information that you know about, That's going to get you a lot further, not just in an architect career, but in any type of career, because it makes you unique. Being able to take your thoughts, be able to formulate them in a way that people can understand, and then be able to put people at rest with that information, that how you present that information, what the information is going to be able to address the need. So that's going to be critical. So as you go throughout your week and you learn these things, and I say this sincerely, get proper training, whatever it may be. If you want to read a good book from a good author, read that. If you want to join us, whichever you might want to do, but get proper training. And within that training, focus on what gets you the biggest bang of the buck. If you were yesterday on the CCIE discussion, I said the same thing. I like to plan out things. I like to find what gives me the highest probability. And the highest probability for success when it comes to a actual architect career is going to be that 70% you should focus on, the business critical skills. I can't emphasize it enough. You can, we don't necessarily show them here, but when you join us on Thursday, we show you some ranges when it comes to salaries. And you'll notice that sometimes there's a $100,000 range. Sometimes there's a $250,000 range. And why is that? Is that because you're a CCIE? Is that because you're CISSP certified? Is it because you got 20 cloud certifications? No. It's exactly what we're doing right now, is this communication aspect of it. Can you work with people? Can you present to them, sell them on the ideas that you have that's going to improve their business? So that would be some tips I would give you. And since you're new, as you mentioned, cloud, the entire idea of cloud is a novel idea to you. I would not focus on the cloud service providers immediately. And the reason I say that is they run a business, and their business is to lease or rent you their infrastructure. The infrastructure, as Mike mentioned, could be compute resources, it could be networking resources, it could be security-based resources, definitely infrastructure as a platform. We also get application as a platform, right? So that's their business model. They're renting you these. What we would suggest you do is, especially if you're new, learn what the actual technologies are. Because once you understand what those technologies are, now you can learn the actual proprietary way that an Amazon would be offering you this service, or how a Microsoft or Google or an Oracle. And the wonderful thing is, if you actually apply yourself in learning the material that way, guess what? You can be a cloud architect. You can be an enterprise architect. Even if you wanted to become a solutions architect, you can now pivot in that direction. Remember, again, what do you get for the biggest bang of your buck? You want to be flexible in your approach to these things. So that's what I would suggest to you, Adam. If you have any follow-up questions, please let us know. But that's just some little guidance, a little tips on what you can focus on your career that does not necessarily include certifications immediately, but actually following the journey of gaining knowledge and then transforming that knowledge into what it really should be, something applicable, which is wisdom. Very good question.
Very.
The next question comes from Cloud Doctor. What certifications will help advance my career in cloud architecture?
Okay, Cloud Doctor, this is a tough one. There are no actual architecture certifications out there. Just like there's no certifications to be a CEO, and there's no certifications to be a chief information officer or a chief technology officer. There are some certifications that, well, will get you an architecture interview. So I'll tell you which ones they are. If you take the Azure Solutions Architect Expert, the Google Professional Cloud Architect, or the AWS Solutions Architect Professional, they contain zero architecture. They contain systems administration. Here is the name of a proprietary service. Here's how you can configure it, which architects don't do. But I'm still going to tell you to get one. Why? Because it's going to look good on your brand and it'll help you get interviews. And then Cloud Doctor, as long as you're trained and understand architecture, getting an interview is a good thing. Now, after that, I typically like to do an architecture framework before. And here's what I mean by an architecture framework. You know, how do you do your architecture? You do start with the CEO first, and then look at the business architecture, and then look at the data, and then look at the tech. That's more like the TOGAF framework. Or do you look at the people and who's connected to whom and what their goals are and how they work? That's a different type of a framework. So TOGAF is probably the most common enterprise framework, so that's the one I recommend, the TOGAF 10 certification. Again, they will not teach you how to be an architect in TOGAF. But if you're already trained to be an architect, it's the process. Again, it's just a process. So I practiced a lot of orthopedics in my career. My wife practiced predominantly internal medicine and cardiology. When my wife evaluates a patient, because she comes from medicine, she starts with the head, goes to the eyes, the ears, the nose, the throat, the lymph nodes, the neck, and she does it that way every single time until she works her way to the feet. That's exactly what internal medicine people do. Orthopedic people, like me, or physical medicine and rehab people, start at the big toe, and then we evaluate the foot, and then we evaluate the ankle, the knee, the hip, low back, etc. Because that's the part of the kinetic chain that affects how they walk. Now, if I always start at the toe, that works great for me. And if my wife always starts at the head, that's a different process. And when you look at architecture certifications and frameworks like ITIL, for example, or TOGAF, it's just a process, but you have to know how to be an architect before that works. So I still say get a TOGAF 10. Now, I'd say the best architecture certifications in MBA, because at least that's talking about business skills that are more valuable. But other than that, I'm very fond of the CISSP, and I'll tell you why I'm fond of the CISSP. Even though it's a security certification, I'd say there's 10 times more architecture in it than, say, the Solutions Architect Professional from AWS or the Azure Solutions Architect Expert. And it makes you think about things from a business perspective. I will also tell you that when I have clients that get CISSPs, people come out of the woodwork to go interview them. And for that, I actually like the CISSP for people that are more interested in security. I used to, and potentially still recommend, the Cisco CCNP for people that have an interest in networking, because it does have some good networking in there, but that's more of an engineering exam than a networking one. And lastly, the other good certification for architecture is the Cisco Certified Design Expert. I'm not recommending it because it'll take you about as much time to do an MBA, and it'll probably cost you $20,000, $30,000 to prepare for it as well. And an MBA you can probably get inexpensively for not that much more. And when it comes down to it, the average salary for people with strong business acumen is $558,000 a year. You can pull that from salary.com. And if you look at the average salary at Cisco of a senior director, which is typically a business acumen job, it's about $550,000 a year. Same thing for, say, Palo Alto Networks. It's about $550,000 a year. Same as we're seeing with that, salary.com, $558,000 for people with strong business acumen. So that'd be my certification, is I'd get an MBA. Now, Cloud Doctor, I'm going to give you a secret that is honestly hard and almost humiliating to talk about. I had a lot of certifications when I was younger, a lot of them. The MCSC, the CCNP, the CCDP, the CISSP, the CCIE. And when I reached a certain level in my architecture career at Cisco, who invented the CCIE, my manager said, please, Michael, remove these certifications from your resume. Because right now I see your CCIE and your CISSP, and I think you're a techie. I'm paying you to be an executive architect. I want our clients to see you as an executive architect. Please get rid of the stuff, and I think it'll be better for you long term. And boy, did that increase my salary, getting rid of that stuff. People took me differently. I changed my clothes, wore different suits, came in there with my MS and my MBA as opposed to my CCIE, and they were like, oh, I like this guy. And I was able to design, present, and sell solutions that were 10 times the value previously, which obviously got me much more pay, much more promotions, and I was able to impact my clients greater.
So, and I'm going to say this, don't hate me, Cloud Doctor, when I tell you this, but honestly, no certifications will help you advance your cloud architect career. And I say it because of this reason. You already have a career. So generally, when you use certifications, it is a way to jumpstart your career if you don't have previous experience. It at least gives the hiring manager or the recruiter somewhat of an idea that you might know something. That is generally how certifications help brand you when you go forward. So if you needed that to jumpstart your career, definitely there's going to be areas that certifications that you can pick up. Mike mentioned a few of them. But I would go this way. If you already have a somewhat, even if maybe it's a new career, just maybe a year or two, what will truly help you advance your career is not going to be the tech stuff. Because when it comes to the tech, you still need to know it. That's why we earlier said about 30% of that your time you should kind of invest into learning technology. If you, let's say you're not very good at it, or if it's maybe a new technology or a new way of applying the technology, let's say to a business requirement, or just generally repackaged technology. Think of something like software-defined networking, right? Theoretically, that's not a brand spanking new technology suite. It is something that was repurposed, packaged together, and then rebranded because of certain things that it could assist you in solving, right? So you might have to learn those. But I would definitely tell you, if you listen to anything that we generally discuss online or even within our classes, a architect is, as we said, depending on if you're a cloud architect, a network architect, a security architect, if you're an enterprise architect, the business skill requirement just goes up depending on which role you have. So even at a 50-50, you got to ask yourself this: what skill set would provide me with my best opportunity in moving ahead above anyone else? So as a strategist, you have to ask yourself, what is it that everybody else is going to be focusing on? I can definitely tell you from our students that we speak to, and then many people that come also on this channel and that submit us messages via email or have consultations with us, it is the technology. So if 90% of the people focus on the technology, should you not focus on the business acumen, the things that are going to be more closely associated with what your actual job role is? Would that not aid you in being able to advance your career? Just ask yourself that. Because realistically speaking, Mike mentioned, we have done our CCAs. We know what it means to be hands-on technicians, right? Or engineers, architects, whatever title you want to give them, right? We know what that means. And both of us, having reached that pinnacle when it comes to certifications, have found that there was a glass ceiling.
Yep.
It didn't matter how good technical we were. It didn't matter that we had a CCIE when it comes to routing and switching. If we were fantastic in data center technology, it didn't even matter if we were good at security. It didn't matter anymore. There's a diminishing return of investment at some point when it comes to tech. So while you need to know it, just understand that within the architecture realm or the design realm, understanding how to lead people, how to bring people together, that leadership style, being able to communicate with people, being able to communicate in a way that they understand. Meaning, if you're speaking to an architect group, how would an architect group or the architects actually communicate with one another? What type of verbiage would they use? How does that contrast towards, let's say, the C-suite? How does that differ when you have to speak to the engineers? Because guess what? You will have to work with engineers and you will have to communicate with them because they're going to be the lifeblood that's going to help you make your ideas become real, right? So that's crucial to be able to communicate effectively with them. So if you're going to focus on something, and let's say you need something very specific, I will tell you, if you're going to invest in training when it comes as an architect, and you already have a somewhat established career, maybe a couple of years, focus maybe on training towards an MBA more. Because that business acumen is really going to help you to add more dollars basically to your salary range. You know, and if you show up on Thursdays, we encourage everybody. We're going to have some slides ready or some images that you can see actually what the discrepancy can be or the salary range for some of these architect careers. And you can see that that is that range where you can basically fulfill simply by business acumen, how you're going to communicate. So that's what I would suggest. Aside from that, if you're new, that's going to be a little bit different. If you need to know how to brand yourself, as Mike mentioned, there's going to be multiple things. But I do hope that answers somewhat your questions. I know it's a little controversial by me saying nothing really will help you once you have an established career, but we've been there, we've done that. We don't want you to have to go through that same type of pain and figure out the hard way that, man, I just spent 6 years trying to get up my technology acumen just to find out that I didn't need to do that. Actually, spending 60% more of my time on what was business related would have gotten me further.
Yeah.
So I hope that makes sense to you, Cloud Doctor. And again, thank you very much for the question. That's really a good question.
Because remember, Cloud Doctor, at the end of the day, the reason people hire architects is so we can make a positive impact in their business. So when you think about it, is this going to help you make a better impact to your client? Everything you learn. Is writing a Python script going to help you increase your client's profitability? No, it will not. Re-architecting a business process might. Improving their system so that they can scale and sell more can definitely do it. Reducing their downtime may or may not improve their profitability. I mean, there are companies that lose $600,000 a minute that they're down. Some lose a lot more than that. So, keeping their downtime to say 3 minutes a year could be beneficial for an organization like that. Somebody else might need more agility, the ability to change directions on a dime. Somebody else may need some scalability and flexibility based upon what they need. So knowing what their needs are and how to help them, how to get the organization's largest cost, its labor, to do more. What technologies can enable the people to do a better job, do 2 to 3 times the work without overworking the employees? That's how you can do it. Those are the things you think about.
And I would tell everybody, put yourself in the shoes of the person that is going to be providing that type of opportunity for you. If it's a hiring manager, put yourself in their shoes. What would you like to see in a candidate to help them advance their careers? What do you think will be important to them? If you can answer that question, then now you can reverse engineer your approach, plan it out, and then actually meet that expectation. The architect career is really wonderful. It's a service career. That's what I call it. You're there to serve your clients. So it's not going to be about you. So you want to find out what they need, what they want, then meet those expectations. And that's what's going to propel you forward, not the other things. Now, if they want you to learn about a technology, guess what? Learn about the technology if that's what's going to help the business. But aside from that, focus on what makes you more valuable. And that's not going to be the technology, unfortunately. Great question, though. Next question from Sagi. I started a cloud architecture consulting business. How can I appeal to smaller startups, or what are common cloud solutions needs in early startup stages from your experience?
Sagi, thank you for your question. Let's first take this very differently from an architect versus an engineering perspective. Here's the secret in an architecture consulting business to make money and to make a lot of it. Improve your client's business performance. So, what do you know about the startup business? What do you know about your client? Truth be told, if you're brand new, now I can start an architecture consulting business. Why? Because I've got about 500 chief information officers numbers in my phone. And I've got a track record of either decreasing operating costs, improving operational efficiency, improving revenue, decreasing downtime, etc. So generally speaking, you should have a lot of context and experience before you start your own, because otherwise marketing costs are going to get there. Now, if you don't have that and you're starting, what I would advise you to do is limit yourself to a niche. Pick one industry vertical that you know and you know well. So for example, I spent a couple of years as a healthcare architect. Made sense because I used to practice internal medicine. And before that, I was a nurse. So I knew how to help healthcare organizations be more profitable, operate more efficiently, and make less errors because I lived, eathed, and breathed the life. So maybe you come from one. So I would say first find an industry vertical. Now you have to understand that you can't give the same architecture to Netflix that you can to Amazon Prime, that you can have to Max, that you could also do with Paramount Plus or anyone else, because their business architectures are different. So if you want to be able to appeal to small business, first make sure you can solve business problems, which means really boost your business knowledge. Then evaluate the problems that most small businesses have. Revenue is typically a problem for small businesses. So in your industry or your niche that you pick, because you're not going to be able to learn all businesses in less than, say, 3 to 5 years. So if you're going to try and start a business and be the CEO and have to create marketing collateral and have to sell and then have to design solutions, unless you have 40 to 100 people that are going to be with you, now you got to narrow it down. So maybe you can learn the business in the next 6 months to a year. And what can you do to increase revenue? Startups are typically people constrained and cash constrained. So how do you cut the cost of what they do? How do you minimize their need on internal staffing? Meaning, what kind of AI or generative AI solutions can they use to hire less people? Because that's a big startup problem, is they have no money. And when they have money, they typically, if they hire people, they typically outspend their money. So they've got what's called the cash burn rate. So how do you stop the bleeding? How do you stop their hemorrhaging? How do you make those workers they have supercharged? How do you help that organization outsource? Because when you're dealing with a small business, and let's say they're in New York City, maybe part of your architecture is to create a remote access strategy to get them people in another part of the world that are cheaper. And that's part of your architecture. Understanding their business processes. How does that organization want to sell? Maybe they've got it in their mind they're going to sell it this way. But here's the reality. Maybe you can use some kind of technology that can shorten the sales cycle or improve their business. So again, you're looking to do that. So startup phases, typically, they're disorganized. Stuff is connected together by bubble gum and chewing and tape, and it looks like it's a disaster. They typically don't have any good processes. They typically lack security because they're growing so fast, nobody thinks about it. It's an afterthought. They typically have scalability problems. So what needs can you have? Now, I got to tell you, when we started our company 4 years ago, people came to me and said, Mike, I can save you money by going to the cloud. And I said, okay. So what I did is I went to Amazon and I bought a bunch of servers that had dual E5, 26, I think 77 V3 CPUs or something like that. By the way, I paid $1,000 for each one of those servers with 1 terabyte NVMe drives in them. Amazon rents them out for $1,000 a month. Now, right now, you can buy those same servers from Amazon for $400, and Amazon still charges $1,000 a month. So the person that was going to save me, because he was the expert on small business architectures, was going to cost me $400,000 for something I paid $11,000. I said, thank you. You don't know small business, you don't know technology, and you don't know architecture. I do appreciate your coming and giving your advice, but no, thank you. So that's really the key, is you have to be able to offer something. So what can you do for the client? So I ask you, what industry do you know best? Is it healthcare? Is it retail? Is it finance? What is it? And then what can you do to improve their business? And here's the secret. Somebody sent me this ridiculous LinkedIn message yesterday that said, I will DM 30,000 people and get you 30,000 new connections each month on LinkedIn by mass connection request. And I said, no, thank you. And the person said, why? I said, I deliver a great product. I deliver a great service. People come to me because I do good things and I get good results. I don't need to go out there and spam people. I don't want to damage my name or reputation. And he couldn't understand what I meant by delivering good products and good services and helping your clients. Your best marketing is making your clients successful. You make your clients successful. And success isn't that the tech works. We're not engineers. Success is that the tech makes a meaningful impact on their business. So, what business do you know? And if you tell me that, then I'll be able to totally help you. But what business do you know?
It's a little bit of a tough one, right, in regards to startups, because startups have problems that, generally speaking, established business don't have. So I would put it this way. If this is your, as you mentioned, this is your own consultancy business, you're going to have to compete somehow with the big boys. Okay. So what is it that you pragmatically can do to at least make yourself stand somewhat out? One of the things that Mike mentioned is the way your product is delivered. Is it consistent? Is it great? Then he brought out there has to be a level of customer service that, generally speaking, is not something a larger company can attain because of how many customers they have. So that's a benefit to you. The term that you want to think about then is customer experience. Provide an experience to the customer that these larger entities cannot give them. And because these are smaller and you have less clientele to begin with, you can really, really tailor your offering. And the way that you do that is how Mike really brought it out. You have to understand what their business is and then be able to provide them something somebody else can't. So basically, fix a problem that others cannot simply fix. And generally speaking, with startups, that's going to be capital based, right? They generally don't have a huge capital of startup. So you'll have to figure out, how do I optimize the operations costs that they're going to incur when going to the cloud? Can you do better than, let's say, a managed service provider or the cloud service provider by themselves? Can you do something that makes you stand out in that sense? But always start with the customer experience. Start off with the quality of product that you're going to offer, including the solution, the way you personalize that product to them, as well as your own customer service. And of course, you want to be consistent. You want to be able to be consistent because with these type of startups, how you're going to appeal is that you help other startups be successful, right? That referral that you're eventually going to get. So that's what I would suggest, but definitely research the company, see what niche they're in, understand that, and then devise a solution that's really going to help them solve a critical need. Not all their problems, find one and be good at solving it. All right, let's go to the next question. It is from Cloud Doctor. What are typical challenges people face in this industry and how do they overcome them? So I'm assuming general architecture type of industry. What would you say, Mike?
So here's the biggest challenges people face. Because it's nothing for me to get someone hired. Nothing with the right training. And whether it was Jeffrey West, who was a geologist who got hired at Kalian as a solution architect as his first tech job, whether it was Wallace Agana, who was a sales rep who got hired by JP Morgan Chase as his first tech job, whether it was Coyote, whose first job was at AWS as a solution architect, or Ivan Tamba, whose first job was at AWS as a solution architect, and they never worked in tech before. Or whether it's someone that I worked with like Pritipal Sejan or Harsha that had decades of experience. The biggest challenge is they train to be an engineer and not an architect. And they're busy coding, building, and then someone asks them architecture things. And they don't even know what architecture is. And they go in there and I've seen it. I've interviewed thousands of people that are architects over the years or claim to be architects. And I asked them how to design something. And they didn't know. Give me the design considerations for this. And they didn't know. An organization has these business challenges. What can you do about it? And they didn't know. Or I asked them, what was the process to create and design an architecture? Or they didn't know. Or I asked them, what was the process to lead a large RFP? And they didn't know response. And I said, what are some key takeaways that you have in managing stakeholders? And they didn't even know what a stakeholder was. That's the biggest problem, Cloud Doctor, is people train to be engineers and they want to be architects. Imagine if you trained to fly an airplane and then you tried to go interview to be hired as a cardiothoracic surgeon. It's that different. It really is. And if you remember what we do and you get the skills in what we do, and I've spoken to thousands of hiring managers and tech executives over the years, and here's what they tell me, Cloud Doctor. You give me someone that can do the job and do it well, that can communicate well, that I can trust, that has energy, enthusiasm, passion for their work, that's emotionally intelligent, that's a good team player that'll go up and beyond, Mike, and I'll hire them. I don't care where they went to school. I don't care their background. Those are what I need. And if you can think about that at all times, the whole point of an architect is to improve your client's business. The better you are at that, the better you are delivering excellent customer satisfaction, the better you are at bringing revenue into your business, you're there. So I've got two architects on my team. I've got Mark, who brings in $300 million a year of solutions because he's pre-sales. And I got Billy Bob that brings in $50 million. Well, with Mark's $300 million of solutions that he closes, I can pay him $500,000, $800,000, and it's nothing compared to what he got. For Billy Bob that's bringing in $50 million, I don't know if Billy Bob's going to be here next year. I might replace Billy Bob with another Mark. Or better yet, have someone that can bring in $500 million a year. Those are what I'm looking for, the big people that can bring in and transform their clients and do such a good job impacting their client's business that they come back to me and say, okay, now you migrated us to the cloud. Let's talk about our contact center. Let's talk about our next AI project. Let's talk about this modernization thing. You remember, you keep your eye on the ball. Like in baseball, they say keep your eye on the ball. You play golf, you got to focus where that ball is. It's the same thing. Focus on making your client successful. Don't turn into an engineer. Stay an architect. And also, a lot of people have an ego, and David Lithicum and I always talk about this. There's no room for an ego. I've been an architect for 25 years. I don't design any architecture by myself. None. Zero. I build a team. because I know what I know, and I have some areas that I know real well. But you know what? They took me 25 years to learn and be an expert on. Mark and I both come from networking, and together we probably have 40 years experience. Guess what? What I know and what Mark knows are two different things. At least 50% of what we know is different. And I can introduce Mark to a unified communications engineer. Again, in networking, he'll know things that Mark and I don't know. And then I can introduce that person to a wireless expert who will know things that Mark and I don't know. And that's just networking. So that's the next place where people go bad. They try to learn everybody else's job other than their own. Master your job. Be the best of the best of the best. You would not find an Olympian, let's say an Olympic gymnastics trying to compete in marathon running. They know to focus on gymnastics. You wouldn't find the world's greatest cardiothoracic surgeon moonlighting as an airplane pilot or a software developer. Be the best architect. Know it's a specialty. Love it, live it, eat it, breathe it, and put 100% of your time into making your clients more successful. People will fight over you at salaries you've never dreamed before possible. That's what I would say.
I would add to that is what I've seen, not just within the cloud architecture, but the general IT industry, right? Let's zoom out and let's look at the IT industry. And I'm going to base this also based on my experience, other architects, engineers I've spoken to. I've known Mike and me, we've had many personal conversations about these things. But I would definitely say the typical challenges that any person, when they try to get into IT, face is a lack of direction. And that's going to foster a lack of focus. What do I mean with that exactly? If you go on YouTube right now and you search how to become a world-class engineer, there's going to be 50 people with different opinions. Now you're going to wonder, well, how do I sift through this? This one person tells me one week, I need to learn Kubernetes now. Next week, the same person makes a video and they tell me, now you need to learn about OSPF now. The third week, now he tells me, well, you need to know about the software development cycle now. What do you think that's going to do to a person that has zero experience in their career? Zero. It's going to be like the boat in a storm. It's going to be tossed hither and whither. It's not going to have a stable footing. It's not going to know where to go. There is no direction. And when there is no direction, if you got nothing to aim towards, at least a bullseye or some type of direction, guess what? You don't know what to focus on. We are beings, creatures. We look for purpose, something that's going to give us a purpose that can drive us. And we need a goal for that. So I would definitely say that a lot of people need good training. They need somebody that can guide them for a particular career without having them being distracted by all the things. Because believe it or not, while, for example, let's go with networking, because there's vast from compute to storage, whatever there are, just billion things you can learn when it comes to IT. If we look at something like networking, I don't necessarily understand nor do I enjoy really wireless that much. It's just something about it just didn't click for me. Do I know some stuff about it? Sure. Am I the expert at it? Definitely not at wireless. But I will find you somebody who is an expert. But that's just one of the things that you can learn that are out there. Should you? What about voice over IP then? That's part of networking, right? Even though we're adding voice. What about security? There is security also in networking. You see what I mean? There's so many things that you can lose focus on. That's why the proper training is necessary, because it gives you a direction. And that in case also allows you to focus in on something. So that's typically what I see in all phases of people's career, is this lack of direction, which in turn fosters a lack of focus. Once you have that, it's like that dog that has the bone, right? They won't let go. Once you have that direction, that bone, you're going to be able to accomplish miraculous things in your career. But you need to have the right setting, the right focus, the direction. And that's also one of the reasons that we host these Q&As, because we are hoping that by addressing the questions you have, we can give you some type of a direction so that you at least know where you're walking towards so they can accomplish it. When it comes to the actual career development program, guess what? We go a lot deeper, because we're going to have the time and the resources to dedicate to our students to be able to guide them towards a specific goal. So we'll discuss this a little bit more on Thursday. So if you can join us on Thursday, please go ahead. But generally speaking, find a way to get a direction and then focus on that.
Yes, Tyrone, I want to take one question out of order, and I'm just going to give it a quick response, just me, and then we'll get to the rest of these. Can you bring in the question from Visuals Multimedia?
So I'll read it out loud so that we at least have it on recording. It says, whenever I watch these day in the lives videos of cloud architects, I hear a lot of speech that sounds like mumbo jumbo. How do I learn to speak the way that is needed for these roles?
Visuals Multimedia, if you see something that sounds like mumbo jumbo and a bunch of acronyms strung together, it's not an architect that, generally speaking, actually has an architect job. It's someone that wants to pretend to be an architect. I can tell you when I started my architecture career, and I mean, initially I did speak a little bit with too many acronyms and too many buzzwords. I finally got promoted into an executive architect role, the kind where you get paid real money. And the first thing that I was asked by my manager was to create a council of chief information officers from all over the globe on what they need in healthcare. And they said, I want you to lead this business council. And I gave a presentation, and everybody had this look on their face. As it turned out, it was my first big presentation. I had my executive coach, Frances. She's awesome with me in there. And I said, Frances, what'd you think of that presentation? Because internally, I didn't like the looks on the chief information officers. She said to me, Michael, she said, would you be offended if I sent you a book? I said, you want to send me a book? You want to give me an education? I am thrilled. I am grateful. She sent me this book, and it's called Why Business People Speak Like Idiots. And she told me, she said, if you want to make it to the top and where you're going, and you want to add another $100,000 or $200,000 a year to your salary, communicate in plain language, no buzzwords, none of this mumbo jumbo. Explains things simply and effectively. She said to me, the people that make the decisions, the CEO doesn't know about the tech. They don't care about the tech. All they care about is the financial impact of their business. She said the chief information officer is an executive. They're not engineers. They don't know this stuff at a low level. They're trying to create an architecture to have map technology to the strategy for the business. She gave me this. My salary went up like you can't even believe. I got a stock grant bonus that was enough to buy 2 Mercedes out of that year. And instantly, I learned never to speak in terms of mumbo jumbo ever again. If you hear me communicate, if you hear David Lithicum communicate on any of our videos, there's no mumbo jumbo. Simple, plain language in everything we do. You do that, you will stand out from the techies, you will earn more, and you will have opportunities like you can't imagine. So I just wanted to touch that because I figured in case anybody else popped in or jumped off quickly, this would be totally helpful for them. Communicate in the most simple, clear, and effective manner. And don't use acronyms. You know why? They mean different things to different people. I was teaching a class, and we have an anti-acronym rule in class. Somebody put in SPF, and I thought shortest path first. Mark had his own thing that he thought, and apparently somebody was talking about a single point of failure. We didn't know. So no acronyms, simple, pure communication, clear language. Great. Let's go to the next one, and thank you for that. And please bring your questions. We want to help you in your career.
You have no idea how much home that hits, that type of question. You don't have to go back to it, but it's amazing once you start working with people and potential customers. You don't want to look like a fool by spewing off all these different acronyms, because depending on what actual business they're in, they could misunderstand you horribly, and it can cause you problems. But anyway, Mike and me, when we see questions like that, we have a lot of scenarios that run through our mind because of our own experiences that we have made. And unfortunately, we did learn the hard way. But we learned quickly. We learned quickly afterwards to correct ourselves. All right, let's go to the next question, please. Question from Ross7. You gentlemen's thoughts on GIAC, Security Expert, Certification for Security Architecture.
I wouldn't do it, Raz7. I'll tell you, Raz, there's there's a couple of cybersecurity certifications that I tend to like, and I'll tell you what I like them for. I wouldn't tell you to do it, but The CCSP from the ISC2 is kind of this beautiful intro level to cybersecurity and cloud security. It's very gentle, very beginner level. But if I had someone that had no background whatsoever in technology and they wanted to start with an easy certification, I'd say do that. Use it as a replacement for the CompTIA Security Plus because it holds a lot more weight on a resume. And I would also tell you that it's got about 10 times more depth, even though it's super basic, than that Amazon Security Advanced, whatever it is. In fact, we created a course for that, but just felt guilty about teaching it because it lacked so much security. But the CCSP is a good intro to junior level security for a cloud architect. Then we move into my favorite and the only security certification I ever recommend for most people is the CISSP for an architect, because it is an architecture-based, business-oriented, super wide, not real deep architect level certification. And I personally recommend that as an intro to security, and then spend the rest of your life learning whatever the key domains are out of the CISSP for security people. I'll tell you, there's some good elements in the CISM, because it explains security from the manager / architect perspective. Again, it's super basic, but there's that. So those three I like for the architect side, but I'm only going to recommend the CISSP because that's kind of the one hitter that kind of means more than than any of the rest out there. Now, if I had an ethical hacker, meaning an engineer that was trying to break into systems, there's two. There's an OSCP that's fairly well respected, and there's a CEH master. Now, let me explain to you the CEH. There's two versions of it. There is the CEH, which is a written exam, not that big of a deal to pass. Doesn't mean that much. There's a CEH master where you actually pass the written test, which is no big deal, and then you have to break into systems in front of a proctor. That one is typically a good one, but that's for penetration testers or ethical hackers. Offensive security people for those last two certifications, not architects, which tend to be defensive. So that's how I feel about that. And after getting people jobs everywhere and seeing the kind of, responses they get to various certifications, that's it.
Okay. I'm very close to what you think about that. I definitely would add it, for everything, there's a time and place. For a exam or certification such as this one, you'll need definitely some very deep understanding and experience. So it would not necessarily be an entry-level one. But if you had the bandwidth, and particularly in the, let's say, the locale where you're at, that this is something that looks great to have, I would definitely say if you have the time, go for it. It can only enhance your image, your brand, but I always caution, make sure that it is viewed highly within your area. Because what can happen many times, we had the discussion yesterday, within the networking domain, there's certifications too, right? People view them highly, the CCIE. But that doesn't mean that every company even knows what that is. So it's going to be difficult for them to put value on that. So make sure that in your locale, that the businesses that you're going after as an architect actually understand what it is and that they have some value for it. Otherwise, it's going to be great experience gaining it and you're going to learn a lot. But besides that, really, what else is it going to do for you? Because remember, when we spend a lot of time gaining this knowledge, we have to make sure that we also get a return on our investment, our time, our resources. And if something can't do that, why are you doing it? Why are you just throwing your money away?
And time.
You want to be able to, and time. Yeah, definitely that. So just keep that in mind, plan it out. Other than it's fantastic, but what can it do for you? That's always going to be a question within your locale.
And Mark brought something up about your locale. I'm going to take the CompTIA Security Pros. In the Fortune 100 and 500 company, it's almost worthless. But if you wanted to get a job at the U.S. government, it's mandatory in cybersecurity. So that's one of those things. In the business world, the CISSP is worth everything. The Security Plus is not. In the government, that Security Plus is really important in the U.S. government. So that's what Mark meant. Check your particular industry, but as a general rule, I wouldn't recommend it. If you want to be an architect, I'd rather see you get an MBA or get more business acumen and earn a lot more.
Yeah. Again, specifically what you want to be, right? We can only tell you that in itself, great. Architecture, there's, again, I'm going back to this. There, you can get more bang for your buck for with other things if that's what you're going after, is the architect career. If you're doing this as almost like a personal achievement, we might tell you otherwise. I mean, it's going to be fantastic. Again, if knowledge is what you're after, fine. But remember, it's still your time. It's still the money you're going to spend. You want something in return for it. And I can tell you, I've unfortunately done this in the past. I've gone after something because I really wanted it, but it didn't do anything else for me. And this feeling of accomplishment does wane after some time. Yeah. Every so often, if you look at it, you'll be proud of it again. But what else could you have done with those 6 months that you just spent gaining that? I just leave it right there. But other than that, I think it'd be good if you want to go after it, depending on what type of job or career you have. Great question, Ross. Okay, we have a question from Cloud Station. Hi, Mark and Mike. How can one build technical competency without being overly technical?
Well, Cloud Station, they're not mutually exclusive. You need to build technology, which is the technology and how the technology works. That's your competency, and how you apply the pieces and parts together in a cohesive strategy to impact your client's business performance. So how do you do that? You read. You develop your fundamentals. You read responsible publications, meaning I don't go to Reddit to get information. I go to CIO Magazine, Cisco, IBM's, Dell EMC's information, Palo Alto, Fortinet, Checkpoint, the Internet Engineering Task Force, or what else? The IEEE, for example. And, Cloud Station, how did I learn this, and how did I learn good information versus bad information? When I used to practice medicine, they used to say, the internet's coming out, and you can't just get this garbage that somebody that you don't know who they are. You got to go to respected sources, peer-reviewed journals. So the first thing is making sure you get good information. Go to conferences. Ideally not vendor conferences, but industry conferences, because at a vendor conference, they try to push you towards their way of thinking, which in a manner that's going to impact their revenue. You need to be focused on how do you impact your client's business, not the vendor who's trying to build you to turn them into a free sales rep for them when you go to one of their conferences, or turn you into a fanboy, fangirl, whatever the situation is. So read good information. Have conversations with good architects. Participate in discussion panels. Present your architecture to other architects. Watch their architecture presentations. Ask them questions. You ask them questions. Work in large groups. Work with architects. Lead teams, and be curious. And go out there and learn something new each day. Read a book a week. I used to read 3 books a week. So having good technical competency is great. But I promise you, I could get pretty deep on any networking thing that you want. But Mark, I'm going to describe the OSPF protocol, and I'll do it for all of you. Now, here's the reason. Now, I could tell you that an LSA1 is a network LSA that's generated by the router, and LSA2 is generated by the designated router and the backup designated router, and LSA Type 3 is a summary LSA that goes across areas, and a Type 4 LSA describes the reachability of your autonomous system border router, which is where your external routes are coming in. A Type 7 LSA is a Type 5 LSA in a not so stubby area. That is engineering knowledge. It really is. Now, truth be told, if I want to design a good OSPF solution, I need to understand that too. So there's there. But Mark, ask me what is OSPF, and I'll give you an architect answer for an executive.
Hi, Mike. We're looking to optimize our networking and the way traffic is actually flowing through. We were considering something called OSPF. Could you explain a little bit to us a little bit more what this is, this OSPF protocol?
Sure. Mark, I need to really understand your needs, your performance needs, your availability needs, and if I can get that information, I can make a good recommendation. But let me explain at a high level what is OSPF. It basically is a way to determine how to get your traffic through your network. It's a way to make your network self-heal. Should a router die, one of your network devices, should a cable go, for example, if any of that goes, it'll find a way to get your traffic through the network, much like your GPS routes you, and if there's a route that's blocked. Basically what happens in OSPF is every single device sends the status of where they are And each router runs a calculation to determine how do I get to the end destination in the most efficient manner possible. And if something breaks, it'll recalculate and self-heal itself. Now, I actually gave Mark a real CXO level answer, but I showed you a minute ago, I could go deep on those LSAs if I need to. The key is don't go deeper than you need to for the meeting. Read the room. Still have the knowledge. And boy, I could tell you about those OSPF hellos and the hello and dead timers and how that finite state machine works, but don't. Now, if you're giving a presentation to a bunch of network engineers, maybe you do. Although the reality is the network engineers will know far more about the tech than the network architects, because the architects focus on the business, the engineers are focused on the tech.
Yeah. So I hope you guys paid attention to the demonstration, because it really demonstrated to you all how not to go overly technical. And it really depends on who you're talking to, right? What is your audience like? Depending on who your audience is, you should know where to start off with. If I'm talking to a C-suite, is there a point to discuss areas? Is there a point to discuss what network types there are within OSPF? No, it doesn't matter to them. They want to know what can it do for them. So naturally, what you want to do is, if you know that people are going to be less technically inclined, start off at bare minimum. And unless they show you more, don't expose yourself unnecessarily. Keep that for when you work now with a network architect, when you work with a network engineer, then you go in depth with them, because you're going to have to also ask them questions so that you can design a proper solution, right? So that's really where it comes in. Now, when it comes to your studies itself, we've said this on some occasions, we've also told our students this, you will actually learn the same information as the engineer. Where the difference is going to come in, again, is going to be the focus. Are you focusing on understanding, how do I take this technology and I apply it to something? So we call this a use case, a business case. An engineer or an administrator, they're going to look at this technology and be like, how do I implement it? How do I program this particular protocol into a device and make it do something that an architect gave me, a designer gave me? Now, are there occasions where network engineers, for example, could also be designers? That definitely exists, right? But again, the focus is going to be shifted more towards the technology, so that in-depth understanding of it and the way they're going to talk about it compared to the architect. The architect will still have deep understanding of the technology, but it's not what they're always going to be communicating is this depth. They're generally going to be communicating breadth and then a high-level overview, because you got to think about it. The people that you're going to be presenting this to, did they just spend a year or 2 or 3 learning this protocol so that they can even attempt to follow you? No. So you're going to have to be able to communicate this in a way that's going to be understood by them. And it's this restriction that should keep you from being overly technical. But you have to be careful. I know for myself, I've always been kind of torn back and forwards. And I did notice sometimes that if I didn't really have a good answer to something, that I would fall back on my technical expertise because I felt comfortable with that. It put me back into a safe space. So you'll have to pay attention to yourself and be aware of that that's a possibility, and stop yourself from that happening. It is better to say in a situation, I don't know right now, but let me get back to you on that so that I can present you with a proper answer and a proper solution to your problem. It's better to say that, because believe it or not, a lot of us that have done interviews, we're okay if you tell us you don't know. We expect it. You won't know everything. So remember, who you're talking to is going to keep you from being overly technical, as long as you understand who it is that you're talking to. The conversations Mike and I would have about networking are going to be vastly different than we would have with other people. And that's because we understand who we're talking to. Good question, though, Cloud Station.
Good questions. And if you've got questions, bring them. We love helping people. Tyrone, let's go to the next one. Actually, before we go to the next one, I want to remind everybody that we're going to have a completely free AWS Solutions Architect Associate Bootcamp, and we'll actually explain what the technology is, unlike the majority of the training that's out there, and to a degree of why it's actually used and the use cases of it and the features and benefits for the business. So we'll do that. We actually have about 3 times the content of previous ones because we added a lot of the AWS advanced networking content, much of the content from the advanced security, and we added all the new AI services, have a tremendous number of labs. So sign up, it's free. And on Thursday this week, we're going to have a How to Get Your First Cloud Architect webinar. We'll go over the architecture role, what we do, how to get hired when you don't have experience, the things you need to learn, what hiring managers care about. It's all free. So come join us. And we'll spend about 90 minutes answering your questions live on Zoom. You think you're ready for a role and want an interview? We'll give you a little mini interview. You name it, we'll help you. And it's all free. So come and join us. And, if you want to get an ebook talking about the skills before our webinar tomorrow, download it. It's also in the description of this video about a whole lot, along with a whole lot of other free things to help you with your interviews, anything to help you with your technology career. So let's bring in the next one, Tyrone.
Question from Ross7. Mike, you mentioned the value of an MBA before. How much weight would you give towards a prestige level school or just an online MBA to acquire business acumen?
So, Raz7, there is no such thing as a prestige school to me at this point. What's prestigious to me is someone that has a good education, that learns something that's valuable, that can create a positive outcome for their clients. I would avoid the Ivy Leagues right now. Because there's some companies that are boycotting them. Can't say right or wrong, but a lot of companies are boycotting the Ivy League schools right now. I will also tell you that if you have the ability to go in person, it will be optimal, because one of the things out of an MBA is developing relationships, giving your presentations in front of people, looking at their actual body language, working in physical present teams. So if you can go to a thing, you'll have much more impact. And that's why every class we do is live for our programs. For the most part, most of our programs are live. We don't expect people to just watch a video and type in a chat box and get an education. So I recommend going if you can. If you had to do online, that's okay. The key is make sure that you learn. It's not where you went to school. Look, I've spoken to 1,000 hiring managers. I met 1 or 2 that wanted an Ivy League degree. I did. I actually, when I was at Cisco, they had hired a Harvard MBA to be an architect right before me. He was fired within a month, and I replaced him because he couldn't understand architecture, couldn't understand how to navigate a giant company. He looked good on paper, but, I replaced him. My MBA was from 2 private schools. I did 3/4 of one at Drexel University, and I did the full one at Widener University. So I'd say when it comes to an MBA, get out of it at the lowest cost you possibly can. If you can find an MBA program, a good one, for less than $30,000 to $40,000, do it. I don't see any reason to spend $200,000 and $300,000 on an MBA to learn the same things.
No, I don't know about you, Mike. I know for me, when I think about certifications, school name, basically reputation, I always feel like there has to be context to this. Yes. Because if I don't know about Harvard Law School, and believe it or what, people, there's a world outside of the United States, for example, right? Yeah. There's people generally that don't know. I mean, I'm an immigrant, now an actual citizen, but there are things I didn't know before I came over here. I had to learn them, right? So if you came to me at that stage and said, like, I come from Harvard Law School, I'm gonna look at you like, good for you. What does it mean to me? It means nothing. Yeah. Right? So I would definitely put it this way. It is your competency in what you're learning. So what I mean with that is it's the journey. How do you take this information that you're learning and how do you applying it? Because we're always talking about this application of knowledge, and we generally have a term for that, and it's called wisdom, right? Where you can actually take something, apply it to something, and there's some kind of result from it. Hopefully it's a good result. And that is going to be a lot more important than the name or the where you got it from. Because that person would have to know about that, and it would have to understand the reputation that comes along with it. If they don't know, you might have wasted money, time, right? So again, look at the quality of training that you can get, not necessarily name brand. Remember, 100% cotton is still mostly 100% cotton. It doesn't matter if it's Versace or if it's the Gap, for example. So, And
that's the key. In order to be an accredited business school, you have to teach a certain set of things. They're the same things at every business school across the entire country in order to deliver a real MBA. So make sure you get the education And what is it that employers really value out of a CCIE, out of an MBA, out of anything hard? Well, what employers look for is the following: competency. There's an assumption that if you do an MBA, you know something about business. Mostly correct. Not completely correct, but mostly correct. There's an assumption that when you work full-time and then you go to school full-time, it's hard, which means most people will quit and say, the heck with this. And the strong that survive are willing to go above and beyond, which employers want. Employers are also looking for fighters, competitive people that are energetic, enthusiastic. Again, doing a full-time job and doing a full-time MBA at the same time says this about you. So it's not just the MBA. It's all those other attributes that the person sees about the MBA. One of the reasons I've always liked to hire military, especially out of special operations. I know special operations people will never quit because they're trained to fight through exhaustion, fatigue, pain, illness, injury, that sort of thing. So, think about it that way. It's not just the school. It's the side benefits of the school. When you meet people, you develop relationships. So if you're in person, there's something for it. It's that grit or that determination or will to go above and beyond. Those are the key things we look for out of school Route 7. Great questions you always ask.
Yeah, and you reminded me of something there, Mike, when you brought out your preference on who you would hire based on what. If I was looking for training, irregardless of what it is, I'm gonna, and let's say everything else is equal, right? So the difference is gonna be really the person teaching it. I'm gonna try to find a person that I can connect with, a trainer, a teacher. Because if I can listen to them, if I want to listen to them, there's a higher likelihood of me being able to actually learn the material that they're trying to teach me. Compared to me going to a prestigious school, I don't necessarily know who the teacher might be. Maybe they're going to teach me the same material. Maybe they're a good teacher. But guess what? I, for some reason, can't stand the pitch of their voice. It's just obnoxious to me. And that's, again, there's nothing they can do, but that's how I'm going to feel. And guess what? When you're sitting there hours on end and you feel annoyed, how much realistically are you going to learn? Probably very little, right? So keep that in mind. If everything else is equal, means the quality, what content gets taught, find a person that you can connect with, somebody that you feel like you have something in common with. Again, you always want to try to increase your probability of success. And that's going to be part of it. Because if you're not willing to listen to that person, you're not going to learn anything. At that point, you might as well read the book and then hope that you even connect with the author of their book, the way they write things, the way they explain things. Okay, so just keep that in mind. But aside from that, as you heard personally, the actual name of the school probably wouldn't matter much to us. It matters what you got out of it and how you can communicate what you've learned, basically convincing us. And I know I've been on interviews where we ended up hiring people that don't have the certification, even though I mentioned we would prefer you have it. And you know what came at the end of the interview? What matters that they don't have it? It doesn't make a difference. We know based on talking to this person that they can do it. And more importantly, they're willing to learn, they're enthusiastic, and guess what? We actually get along with them. We like them. That's going to be more important than the certification at that point, or some type of school name. I like that question. That was really good, Russ. Keep it up.
Me too.
So from Dingleman 1, where's the best place to connect with other security architects?
Well, Dingleman 1, where you work, and I know where you work because you came through our training program, there are a lot of good security architects there. I would also connect to some with Cisco, some with Palo Alto, some with Fortinet, some with Checkpoint because they're your security market leaders. I would also attend conferences that are there, and that's where I would connect with other ones. But where you work, in terms of dollar volume, the largest security vendor in the entire world, and where you work, they have a real experience with digital transformation, enterprise architecture, cloud architecture, and security architecture. I think that I'd start locally at home. You're going to have some really great security architects. that I would
I'm
do.
going to add something for those that don't necessarily have the environment around you guys. What you can do is you can use LinkedIn, but I'm going to tell you something very specific that you should do on LinkedIn. You're going to have a lot of people flood on LinkedIn. There's going to be a lot of nonsense that you're going to see, which is expected, just like anything, because everybody's trying to find a way how to make themselves stand out. But the beautiful thing about LinkedIn is that you have time on your side. So you can observe the things that people post, the way they post it. Is this information credible? How do that person actually present themselves? And those are also going to be good opportunities over time to see, is this somebody that I would like to associate myself with? And remember, I know this is not directly related to, but don't go immediately asking them for something. Build a relationship. Once you have actually found somebody that you have something in common, that you think is a reputable source, connect with them, build a relationship before you ever ask anything. But I would say LinkedIn, but be very careful because there's a plethora of stuff, of course, on social media sites such as LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go on to the next question, please. So from Tommy J, I'm in the security field. What role do you think is most needed by an organization and why? And is there such a skill gap in the market? So let's start off with the first. What role do you think is most needed in an organization and why?
So Tommy J, I think the biggest problems right now is the need of architects. And I'll tell you why. I expect to see a lot of engineers being laid off. And architects are getting hired. So Tommy J, about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, we actually started making some videos that said how to keep yourself from getting laid off. And the reason we started making these videos 2 years ago, and we recommended customer-facing roles and architect roles, and we've been published in places like HR.com, Forbes magazine on this, you name it. And we've been published, things like Investors Business Daily, DevOps Magazine, Data Center Magazine, Tech Republic, Tech Radar, Investors Business Daily, CIO Magazine, you name it, we've been published there. As we said a couple of years ago, please get out of engineering. We sensed a pretty significant economic turmoil was going to come. We saw inflation numbers, which were pretty terrifying, which we knew would force interest rates to go up. We also knew that AI could do most of the engineering jobs. AI can code. AI can write a Terraform script. AI can write a Python script. AI can write a Windows PowerShell script or a Bash shell script. And a lot of what those hands-on positions do can be replaced by AI. But architecture, because it's so much leading, so many discussions, so much people to people, entertaining clients giving a presentation can never be replaced by AI. So we said, move to customer-facing roles, get out of back-end engineering roles. Now, IBM had laid off people, and they said, we're using AI, but we're not going to get rid of any customer-facing roles, and you've seen it through the business world, everything we said. We also, Tommy J, had a very profitable and really awesome cloud engineering program. People loved it. People bought it. We didn't even have to sell it. People just came and flocked to it. We stopped selling it. And we actually offered the free option of our cloud engineering people to join our architecture program too, even though they took it, because we were so worried about engineering. And you can see these engineering getting laid off, but there is a critical shortage of architects. Why? The solutions are getting hacked constantly. The cyber threats are growing rapidly. AI is creating new opportunities to protect itself and new opportunities for hackers, and organizations are getting serious. Now that AI is coming into the play, an AI system gone awry because someone manipulates the data is there. So we're always looking for that impetus to drive change in security, and it's there. We're also seeing an unprecedented number of hacking attacks, and the cost of a hack is getting more expensive, not only in terms of, say, brand damage, but in terms of either notifying subjects if their information was compromised, the cost of downtime, and a whole bunch of other things. So organizations now need it. Now, I can tell you, and I've done a lot of security architectures in my life. People say the company has no budget for security. I've never seen that in my life. I've always looked at the organization's annual risk, and I came up with metrics of their annual risk, which we got from consulting firms and good data. I showed them that this is your risk exposure. It's this. We can fix it for this. And they always did it. And I was able to intelligently work with an organization to help them determine which risks to mitigate, which risks to transfer, say, with insurance, and creating a security strategy. And I'll tell you, I'm getting people hired constantly as security architects. One of them didn't listen to me. He took our program. He never worked in tech before. His name begins with a Q. I won't say any more. Anyway, Q came to me and he took his first job as a security admin. And I said, why are you doing this? And he said, I just need to earn a living. And I said, okay. 2 months later, he was offered his cloud security architect role. I've got another one recently that I can think of that was a TV host in Africa that got a really great cloud security architect role. I mean, people with no background like Delroy, who worked on ambulances, got a great, and I can give you example after example. So security architecture roles, and they pay very well. I strongly recommend getting out of back-end engineering roles. And if anybody is in an engineering role, I recommend they build their business skills, their leadership skills, their sales skills, their executive presence, their emotional intelligence. And that way they can move into customer-facing roles, like a sales engineer. And that way they will always have opportunities because they're on the human side of architecture and they don't risk being threatened by AI. And I think we're going to, well, I'm seeing lots of architects getting hard into huge skill gaps. And why can't you find an architect? Because there's nobody on Udemy that's going to teach you architecture. None. Zero. They don't know architecture in the first place. So you're going to have to develop that business executive and that technology, and you put it all in the same person. And if we look at macroeconomics, we look at a supply and demand curve, and there's basically this point of intersection, this little cross. And the greater the demand and the lower the supply, the higher the salary. So kind of think that in the back of your mind. So I'd say I'd say security architecture is really what I recommend now for those reasons.
Yeah, so I do have some thoughts on this. I'm not going to focus so much on the actual role. I think you covered it well in regards to what allows you upward momentum over time, right? Your actual possibilities of earning more. I do want to touch briefly on the skill gap. We all need to keep in mind that, generally speaking, career development is non-existent. It's one of those rarities that you see in organizations such as the ones that we're leading to have that type of development. Most of the time, especially in tech, you might have a year program, maybe 2-year program. Let's say you go to college or some local kind of like tech-specific school. But even then, the actual preparation for the job is very limited. And that is for multiple reasons. Number one, it's very difficult to prepare somebody for any type of job because all type of organizations have different needs. And you'll see that too across when you look at job applications. They generally look like a jumbled mess, right? The descriptions. Yeah. Because the organizations themselves many times don't realize what they truly need. So if a person gets certified, are they technically competent? I'll let you answer that for yourself. But what about everything else? Okay. I mean, Mike and I, I
think we lost your audio there,
side,
Mark.
Right? Am I back? Can you hear me, Mike?
Yeah, I think we lost your audio. We're getting every other word. I'll put in another earpiece just to make sure it's not just my audio.
Okay. Well, in any case, we can go on to the next question if you guys can hear me, and we'll see how that goes.
Okay, Raz7, master's degree in computing systems helpful to architecture? Not really. So I always advise people, especially architects, not to get master's degrees in computer or anything, to get an MBA instead. We have to remember your whole goal is to design systems to optimize business performance. And if you get a master's degree in computer systems, they're going to teach you how to code, which is somebody else's job, and they're going to teach you the academic part of it, which I have no problems knowing the academic part of it. I love the academic part of it. I've done a bunch of master's degrees, bunch of them, 3 of them actually. But I will tell you that, so what we're talking about here is architecture is about designing systems to improve business performance. So it involves business process re-engineering. They won't teach you that in that. It involves giving presentations. You're not going to be getting that in your master's degree in companies. It involves leading people. You're not going to get that in a master's degree in computer systems, etc., and any of those kind of things. But it will be in your MBA. So if you wanted to be an engineer, now I'd say, oh, that's looking good, but you want to be an architect, focus more on the business.
All right.
Please focus on the business. I'm going to put in another earpiece too, in case it was potential something, my earpiece that was going a little haywire there, Mark, when you were speaking.
Fair enough. And then when you're ready, let me know, and then we'll go on to the next question.
Let's go to the next question.
Okay, fantastic. All right, the next question comes from Ross7. Opinions on current layoffs and white-collar recession in tech, and how will it impact current job seekers?
So Raz7, there really isn't a tech recession. We need to be mindful of what's really going on. It is not optimal right now, but who's being laid off? If we look at employer statistics, so let's talk about what companies normally do. Every leading tech company, Raz7, follows what you call the General Electric management principles. And here's what the General Electric management principles are. In order to be the best, you have to have the best employees. So what they typically do is they stack rank their employees from best to worst every single year and quarterly. And as part of these companies, they're supposed to get rid of the bottom 5 to 10% every year. And the reason they do that is the bottom 5 to 10% typically don't work, or they're not helpful, or the bottom 5 to 10% are people that have problems dealing with other people, or they're the people that have the least skills. Not always. Sometimes wonderful people get laid off, but generally speaking, that's what's going on. So about 2 to 3% of technology professionals were laid off, and it comes nothing close to the bottom 10%, which is typically laid off annually. So organizations are doing that. But organizations are also getting rid of positions that are now redundant tech-wise. For example, imagine a blog writer that used to write blogs. Instead of having a blog writer that would take 3 days to put a good blog together, I can now have one blog writer use generative AI and create 3 to 5 good blogs a day after editing. Well, if it used to take 3 days and now they can do 3 to 5 in a day, I need about 1/10 of them. Now, what if I need to write a bunch of Terraform scripts to launch some cloud stuff? This is why we told people a year or two ago, get out of engineering. What if I can just generate my scripts in AI and just tune them, and I can do it in 1/10 of the time? I need less developers. I need less DevOps engineers. I need less cloud engineers. At the same time, organizations are still hiring salespeople. They're still hiring architects. So it's very specific in what's going on. Will it make it harder to be hired? Yes, it will. Because organizations are currently not in the best economic situation, and they're looking. Labor productivity hasn't been going up very much, but costs have been going up very much. So there's that. But there's always opportunities for great people. Most of the time, great people don't get laid off. And I can tell you, I've had to do layoffs. And you're always instructed to, unless you're laying off a division, you get rid of your worst people first. The people that have problems getting along with others, the people that give you a hard time, the people that don't get their work done on time. Now, every layoff makes me sad. Every one. But realistically speaking, we have to look at it holistically. We actually have to look at the numbers of what are actually going on. The numbers are really small compared to the number of people that work in tech. It's less than the bottom 2 or 3%. We're not even dealing with the 10% that, Jack Welch management strategies. Cisco used to talk about getting rid of the bottom 10%. Cisco used to do that or come close to it when they were one of the leading tech companies in the entire world. So it's that. And here's what the driver of that is. So Raz7, let's say I have 5 people on my team, which is about 5 to 7 people is about as many as a good manager can manage and still be helpful. If I've got 7 people on my team and 2 of them do, and 1 of them does nothing, I have to give that extra work to the other 6 people. Do you know what happens to the other 6 people? They get angry because they're working 20-hour days or 16-hour days, and they quit. And do you know who doesn't quit? The worst person on my team, because they're not capable of getting a job somewhere else. So all my good people quit, and in the end of the day, I have a dysfunctional team. And that's why managers typically get rid of their bottom 5 or 10% to show the rest of the people that we don't tolerate, not being great at the job, and also so they can get rid of that bottom person and replace it with someone that's good. Companies also sometimes try to get people to quit on their own. For example, they have a low-performing employee. They don't give them a raise 4, 5, 6, 7 years. They give their other employees raises. They're hoping that person gets frustrated and quits. so they don't have to lay them off. Because I got to tell you, laying off people is the worst feeling in the world. I mean, it is horrible. You feel sick for a month before you have to get let go of one person if you're a good manager. If you truly care about your people, and I've had to get rid of, a dozen people in my life. I can tell you the month before I had to do it, I felt sick. And the month after it, I had to do it because I love helping people and I hate doing it. But sometimes you have no choice. But I wouldn't really think that there's exactly a white-collar recession in tech. I would think there's a right sizing of some people that got hired without the right skills and experience during COVID.
Yeah, I'm going to add something to what Mike said. Everything Mike said is spot on, but I'm going to call out corporations a little bit here, not necessarily because I'm trying to be a jerk about it, but let's be realistic. People run corporations. People run businesses. People make stupid decisions.
Yep.
And sometimes people don't want to take responsibility for their stupid decisions. And it's easier to simply say, you know what, I probably should have hired these 100 people. I simply saw people during the pandemic, I had the fear of missing out. It was the big thing. We didn't know what was going to happen. Will we ever return to normal? I need to hire 100 people because the other guy also hired 100 people. I need to be competitive.
Yep.
Those are stupid decisions.
Yep.
And those stupid decisions now cost people their livelihood. So that's one of the things, on top of all the other reasons, right? Not every corporation is like that, but there genuinely is some people that don't have any. Now, when you look at some of the other industries in tech, and then I'll get to the job seeker part. If you look at the gaming industry or anything technology related, the reality is sometimes corporations buy other corporations. They do these merger and acquisitions,
yep.
Not to attain the people, but to attain the assets. People are generally not asset. People are considered an expense. That's why generally to bring down costs, the first thing they do is get rid of people because that brings the expense down immediately, which makes it look good on their books, right? So you have to keep that in mind. But a lot of times when you see these layoffs, especially like let's say in the gaming industry, they never acquired the company to keep the people.
Yep.
They wanted the asset, they wanted the brand because something looks good if you acquire Activision. I don't need to acquire the other 50 studios underneath it or keep the other 1,000 people employed. That wasn't something I wanted to do. Unfortunately, they're not going to communicate that to you because it does sound heartless. But let's be realistic. When running a business, you're responsible to more than just a set of people too. You're responsible to everybody. And depending on what type of industry you are, if you're an industry leader, you're responsible to anything and everything because you basically run the show, some type of monopoly, right? So that's something you have to keep in mind. It goes both ways. Now, when it comes to job seekers, we have a ridiculous skill gap when it comes to technology professionals. And it's not necessarily just their fault. I always look at it, it's a combination of training that was provided through the years, what was expected from hiring managers on what to bring in, right? So there's a combination of that. So if we can bring up the competency of job seekers and kind of try to bring in some of this idiocy that we've seen with the way corporations hire, the way they put out postings, for example, just simple job descriptions, we should be able to improve that ratio in regards to how many people do get hired. But generally speaking, it doesn't matter if you look at engineering, if you look at architecture, there is a need for all types of people, believe it or not. And that's not just tech. I can walk downtown and see there's in the retail industry, people are needed. There's jobs out there. The question is, will they pay you what you need? And do you qualify for it as well? So those are the two things that I would generally bring out on top of everything, Mike. Again, this is multifaceted. This is complicated. This is not just one single thing. Why we're seeing these things happen.
Yeah. And it's good because Mark's giving you the perspective of the actual architect. I'm giving you the perspective of both the architect, the hiring manager, and the executive. And that way you get it, because I've always said if you understand the other side, you don't have conflicts because you can communicate to people in their sides and their language. So I wouldn't worry about it. There is always ups and downs. I would be great at whatever career I chose to be. You'll never have a problem. I did survive over 23 layoffs in my career, meaning I can remember I was at one company that did 13 layoffs, and my manager would call me every time we announced layoffs. Mike, you're safe. You're safe because of this, this, and this. So go do your job and stop thinking. Okay. And, but I got to tell you, it's always sad to see people be in an unstable situation. But you know what? Every challenge is an opportunity. When I joined tech, about a year later, the internet bubble burst. And everybody was laying everybody off. When I started in tech RAS 7, you know what Cisco's biggest problem was? Keeping enough paper in the fax machine so people could order their routers and switches via fax. They couldn't have enough paper to deal with the orders when they were coming in, kind of like NVIDIA right now selling GPUs. Couldn't even deal with it. A year later, the internet bubble crashed, and then they had to get rid of a big percentage of the people they had. So RAS 7, I come from medicine. I also was a firefighter paramedic, and in medicine, you have to do what's called triage. If an ambulance shows up and there's 5 patients, you have to say, okay, this patient needs to be addressed first and taken to the hospital or they will die. These next 2 can sit around for 3 hours. Don't worry about it. This next one, don't use your resources. They're not going to survive no matter what you do. Same thing when you're running a company. Economy hits a recession. Okay, how do we survive the recession? Which people do we move up because they're going to be good as strategic leaders? Which people can we not afford right now so we can make sure that all the other people that work for us and all of our customers and clients get serviced properly and have a good future? It is a very painful decision that the leader has to make. That's why they say heavy is the head that wears the crown, because I'll tell you, the people that are making these decisions, when you have to make them, it is not easy on you, because you have to think about, I've got 80,000 people that still work for me. If I lay off 10,000, the 80,000 are safe. If I don't lay off 10,000, all 80,000 lose their jobs. So that's what the management is dealing with. So I just want you to understand both sides, because when you understand both sides, then you don't have problems. Problems communicating, problems with others, problems with anything.
Yeah. And the great thing is, and this is why I appreciate you bringing that out, Mike, is we can only control what we can control. But understanding the other person's side, remember just what you said, if the company is run properly, but layoffs are done for the right reasons, you as the person, either if you work there or as a job seeker, you can only control you. So you have to make sure that your skills are up to par with what was being asked in the market. And the reality is, because of the way that economies around the world functions, we're at the mercy of having skills that are going to be appealing to the hiring manager. Yeah. So look at it from this perspective. If you're going to be a good employer or employee, and you know that your employer goes through these things, remember, like Mike, for example, is a person, it hits him very hard. It makes him borderline sick having to do these things. There's CEOs out there that don't like doing it. It really impacts them physically. Sometimes takes years off their life because of the stress that they feel. Do what you can from your side to make their decision easier about you. Put yourself in a position that you're not being impacted by these type of layoffs. And that's going to include, guess what? Again, doing the human things. Being that they know you, who you are as a person, not just as a number, what you can contribute to the success of the business. Those are things that you can do on your own to control your destiny compared to letting somebody else do it for you. Yeah. And you'll see that you'll now understand better why they may have to do things. Again, we're talking about, if not stupidly run, we're talking about a genuinely good run company, right? So do what you can do to make their life easier. And guess what? You're going to help other people get what they want. They will help you get what you want. Yep. And that's the position you want to be in. Great question, Les.
And join us tomorrow on the How to Get Your First Cloud Architect Job webinar. We'll cover the role, everything you need to know, and it's free. So join us.
All right, we got a question from Tommy J. And he says, CISSP or TOGAF? Which certification does the market recognize the most or has the biggest impact initially to a cloud architect's ability to get interviews?
So that is a great question, Tommy J. You know, for years I resisted the TOGAF, and I resisted it because you already have to know the job, and it's just getting certified on a step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5, and which documents to write. And The only reason I added it to my recommendation list is the cloud certifications that had the word architect were so bad in terms of architecture. They were just systems administration and not architecture, totally different career, that I added it, and I'm seeing really good results with people that get the TOGAF. I will tell you, if I had to do one of the two, I would do the CISSP, and here's the reason why. The CISSP actually has a good amount of knowledge in it. It covers business continuity planning. It covers how you can calculate risk, which is very important. It actually has more information about networking, data centers, and cloud than any of the AWS certifications that are actually in it, because they're just the name of the service and how to configure it. At least in a CISSP, they're going to tell you about the different storage area networks and have you think about where you would sandbox memory and processes and processors, and it's got a lot more in it than any of the other certifications, even though it's a security certification. So I'd probably say the CISSP is better in most cases than the TOGAF, but I kind of have a rule with regards to certifications. Look, I've gotten people hired like Jeffrey West with a cloud practitioner, or Delroy Batt with 0 certifications, or Robert Wells got him a great cloud security architect job with a cloud practitioner. Oh, he didn't even have that, but he had knowledge and good skills. But when I have students with CISSPs, the world's really pinging them out there on LinkedIn. You got a job, you happy. You got a job, you happy. And years ago it was a good certification, but I think really has gone is companies are realizing they're interviewing certified people and they don't know anything. I mean, I interviewed 1,000 AWS certified people and asked them to describe cloud computing to me, and they couldn't. When I asked them to explain and compare and contrast the differences between block storage, object storage, file storage, what it is, how they work, how they benefit a company, they couldn't do it. When I asked them about what goes into data, talk about data pipelines to me, and they couldn't do it. When I asked them how to design a secure DMZ, they couldn't do it. Quite frankly, they couldn't do anything other than configure things. The problem is it's easy to find someone to configure something. The real challenge is knowing what needs to be configured and why it needed to be configured. So kind of keep that in the back of your mind. So the CISSP checks off a bunch of boxes, so I tend to like it.
Yeah, Tommy, I look at it this way. I look at it, let's put competency aside. Let's say we study the certifications and we have competency. Let's just assume all that. Otherwise, there's too many variables to consider. If you ask me CISSP or TOGAF, I will look at what both really are. And when I look at TOGAF, it is a great framework that is predominantly geared towards enterprise architects. That's number one, how I look at TOGAF, which means the amount of people that this could potentially be applicable to is going to be a lot less than general architects. So that's one of them. Then you have to ask yourself, okay, if I decide to go for one of them, in the context of what I want to do, whichever architect I want to be, which one is going to be recognized more than the other? So again, if I think about TOGAF, I think about there's certain organizations that are going to recognize TOGAF. They're going to know the benefits and the disadvantages of being TOGAF certified, right? But again, how many companies recognize TOGAF compared to the CISSP? Then you would have to factor in how hot is security. I mean, for crying out loud, we're just getting into somewhat of a phase where we're trying to figure out how do we really provide security while having traffic go in and out of from our private data center to the cloud, then switch this over into a hybrid cloud or multi-hybrid cloud environment, right? So technology, we need technology people that are going to be able to help us to design and then eventually also instruct the engineers to implement that type of solution. Now we're bringing along AI. We don't even know the real implications of AI yet, all the implications. But we're also going to need people that understand the security impacts of AI. So I kind of start weighing what is going to be beneficial to me and where people are going to basically be the context of how they're going to understand the certification. So me personally, I'm with Mike on this, just based on these little pros and cons. I definitely would go for the CISSP because it lays a much better foundation and it's going to have a better initial impact to your career than something like a TOGAF. And I give you one more reason why TOGAF, maybe leave it off a little bit until the later stages of your career, is that as you join different companies, or if you join one company and they provide you with different customers, these companies might have different frameworks in how they actually design a solution. It may not be TOGAF based. So once again, where do you want to spend your time on so that you can gain the maximum return on investment on your time and your money? So just a little food for thought. See what you think about it. Do a little bit of research on it too. See how many people prefer a CSSP compared to a TOGAF, or prefer a TOGAF compared to a CSSP, and kind of lay out a little path for yourself. And if you can do this by maybe, let's say Thursday, join us on Thursday. Let me know what you found. And maybe we can have a little bit more of a deeper discussion, actually get you come off and mute and just discuss a little bit the points and see what we can do to help you find more of a direction within the career that you try to develop. All right, question from Ross. It says, for resume LinkedIn, I'm assuming its purposes, should we be omitting non-tech related previous work history or education if we cannot highlight tech related job functions?
Raz, no, you don't want to get rid of your history. What you want to do is show that your past jobs are aligned to your future jobs. For example, my first job, well, I was hired as a senior network engineer, but I was kind of moved out of network engineering into architecture almost immediately. So here's what existed in my resume. Meeting with patients, interviewing patients, negotiating with insurance companies, leading an office staff of 12 people, delivering presentations at conferences about medications and clinical treatments of care, writing documentation and training and mentoring young medical professionals. So why did I put those things there? Because what did I need to do in architecture? A lot of problem solving, a lot of conversations with people, a lot of training, a lot of leading. So I'll tell you, Raz7, you know where I learned architecture? I learned it by learning to practice medicine, because someone comes in and they've got a medical problem. I ask them about their medical problem. After I ask them about the medical problem, I examine their systems, look in their eyes, ears, nose, throat, heart, lungs, what have you. I make a diagnosis and make a plan. What do I do as an architect, Raz7? I meet with a business and ask them about their business goals, pain points, challenges. I then assess their current systems. I make a diagnosis and I come up with a plan. The only difference between being an architect and being a physician or an attorney or anything else, because they're all planning roles, is the information you need to build your plan. In medicine, I needed pharmacology, pathology, anatomy, physiology, those kinds of things, diagnostic skills. In architecture, it's about understanding the underlying infrastructure and designing it. It's the same job. So keep your old things, but position them and frame them in a manner for your new employee. We're a little short on time, so I'm just going to answer that one, just me. And we can't take any new questions, but we will stick around until 4:30. We were here 2 to 4. You guys are asking questions. We love helping people, so we'll stick around an extra half an hour.
All right, let's go on to the next question then, please. A question from Tommy J. Are architects considered subject matter experts or strategist orchestrators, especially since they don't get too much in the details?
So Tommy J, we are strategists and orchestrators. We are creating a strategy and orchestrating a large team. Now, there are some architects that are also subject matter experts. For example, some of my life I spent designing, I had a lot of subject matter expertise in video. And I literally traveled the world 300,000 miles a year consulting to universities and enterprises and the M-bone on IP multicast. So I was a specialist architect. I worked at Cisco and I was designing systems for bank, and they said, we want to get into the healthcare space. Now, someone that used to be a paramedic, then a nurse practitioner that had an internal medicine practice, I was an expert in healthcare. So I was a subject matter expert in healthcare. And I designed strategies for healthcare clients. It's where I really excelled in my career because I was an expert. Now, there are people that also focus on a technology. Like an AI architect focuses on the technology. They have much more technology expertise than, say, a generic architect that focuses on everything. But all as a rule, we are strategists and orchestrators. And even when I said I was a subject matter expert on healthcare, and designing systems to make hospital systems more efficient. This was still strategy. So a good architect is strategy. A bad architect is focusing on tactical. And why do I say a bad architect? I don't care if you're the best techie in the world. If the systems you design don't improve your client's business performance, you didn't help them. You did nothing for them. So what? The tech works. Great. They spent money. It got no business benefit. You hurt them. They invested money into an architecture that works, a technology that works but doesn't provide business value. If they didn't waste their money on that, they could have invested in something else that would be good for their business. So remember, you're always going to be a strategist or an orchestrator. Great question.
All right. Let's go on to the next question, please. From Alexis. How do you navigate job search when job title is cloud architect, but in the interview, they're asking questions that require an engineer?
Well, Alexis, there's two possibilities that's going on. There are times where I will do an architect interview and I will intentionally ask someone an engineering thing that I know they don't know, because I want to see if they do two things. One is, will they lie to me? Because the second somebody lies to me, the interview's over. The second reason I might ask it is I might be looking for a response that's an architect response. So sometimes they get what's called stump the chump questions, which my friend David Lithicum and I, it's a term we both like to use. Mark, ask me a stump the chump question, and I'm going to respond like an architect, because this is for Alexis. I don't care what it is.
All right. I see on your resume that you mentioned that you've worked as a network architect for numerous years. Could you tell me what the P bit within the OSPF header actually does?
You know, Mark, let's be fair. I've been an architect for the last 25 years. I brought in $2.79 billion of revenue for my organization. On average, I was able to increase my organization's operational efficiency by 3% and yield a 362% return on investment capital for the average client. In addition to this, I've led large teams of architects between 15 and 50 people. I have a contact list that includes 300 to 500 chief information officers and about 200 chief executive officers at Fortune 100 companies. But no, my expertise is on strategy and digital transformation.
Okay.
Not necessarily, you know, the finer points of network engineering.
Fine.
Because a lot of times.
Go ahead, please.
Okay, go ahead, Mark. Respond to that.
No, I was going to say, I appreciate your candor. And with that in mind, I think we should move on and discuss a little further the strategy that we can implement in trying to figure out how we can actually perform proper multi-homing between two ISPs. Because that's really what we can use your expertise in, trying to put the proper team together instead of figuring out some of these minutiae of the details that I just mentioned.
See, that's what I'm looking for. Okay. So, Mark, you mentioned multi-homing to multiple ISPs. What are your business goals? What are your business requirements? What's driving that decision? And then we would have the conversation that would go on. So, Alexis, a lot of the times they intentionally ask you a question just like that to see if you're going to give them an engineering response or if you're going to turn it into a one. You know, Monday after releasing the AI Architect program, David and I hosted a private session on Zoom where we answered people's questions. And he had mentioned that he often gives people one of those weird techie questions to see if the person's going to show themselves as an architect and an engineer. Now, Alexis, there is also the alternative possibility that it's an actually engineering job with an architect title. And you need to find that out too. I can tell you I was hired at one point by a company as a network architect. And on my first day on the job, they said, Mike, I'd like you to build this. And I said, but you hired me as a network architect. And they said, yeah, Mike, the only way we could pay a couple $100,000 a year to you was to call you an architect. But what I really need is a network engineer. I need a builder. I said to the manager, thank you so much. It was nice to meet you. I left and I went to Comcast as a principal to architect within 24 hours because they lied to me about what the role was. So there is that. So if it's an engineering role and you want to be an engineer, that's fine. But if you're ever asked to be an architect and asked to do engineering, if you want to be an architect, don't accept it, assuming you have the financial means otherwise, because you will fail. Because you can't focus on the business, optimize the client's business, manage stakeholders, lead large teams if you're busy focusing on the tech. If you're focusing on the tech, you're focusing on engineering. And that's fine. If you're focused on architecture, you're focused on transformation and business optimization. You can't fly an airplane, fix the engines, and keep the passengers in the seats all at the same time. If you do, the plane will crash. And it doesn't matter if anybody's in their seats if the plane crashes because you're not flying the plane. That's a really good question, Alexis.
All right, let's move on to the next question. From Tie-Up, they ask, after how many years of the job one should start his own company, and then how to get clients?
So the biggest question is, why do you want to start your own company as an architect? So I don't know your career. I can tell you it is not that challenging if you're a good architect with business acumen skills to get an $800,000 chief architect job for a business or a $500,000 architect job. So these things are not hard to get. The reason I say this is most people will earn far more working as an architect than trying to start their own company. What most people don't realize is if you start your own company, you can pick any 16 hours of the day you want to work, 6 to 7 days a week. And you will be doing that because there's always something that needs to be done. You're never there. But if it's your desire and dream to start your own company, or you're like me and you do it out of necessity, I didn't plan on starting this company at all. I had no intention to do it. I'll tell you why I started this company, and then I'll get to the rest of your question. I started this company because I was asked by a friend to help his kid get a really great job in what was probably the best technology place there. And he said, Mike, I've seen your interns. I've seen the jobs they get. I've seen how they perform. My son's ready to graduate from college. So I didn't realize the status of how bad training was out there. I bought 2 courses from Udemy, 1 course from another person that's not on Udemy that had a lot of training out there. I gave the courses to this kid, and I told the kid's father that I would spend 2 to 4 hours with him every Friday. I shipped these courses to the kid on Monday, and on Wednesday, the kid called me and he said, Mike, I set up an S3 bucket and an EC2 instance. What is it? I said, we're training you for an architect. What do you mean you set it up and you don't know what it is? He says, I set it up and don't know what it is. So what is it? That's why I called you. And I said to this kid, Nathan, really good kid. His father's a friend of mine. I said, well, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to watch these courses. And if they talk about what the technology is and how to architect it, guess what? I'm done training you. I'm going to tell your father you can't watch it. I said, but if I watch these courses and what you say is true, we're going to write a book on passing the Solution Architect Associate. We're going to give it away for free. We're going to do free AWS training, and I'm going to start a course on how to help people get hired. I watched those courses in horror because there was the name of a service and how to configure it. There was no architecture in them. Then that's why people were finishing the AWS certifications and knowing nothing architect-wise. So I actually made a webinar on how to get your first architect job, and a person named Julius Kabuka, he was my first student, he said, I want that. So I formed the course, and I've been getting people hired, and Julius also has a great architecture job right now. So it's been there. So there's that. If you want to start your own business, I need you to understand 2 things. You need contacts, skill, and you're going to need money. And here's the reason. If you're an architect like me, you're going to need engineers to ultimately build it, right? Because you can't build it, design it, and go sell and run a business all at the same time. So you're going to have to be focused initially on selling until you can actually hire a sales team. And you're probably going to need a sales team. So I would say, a good sales rep that you're going to hire is $200,000 to $300,000 a year. And you're going to need 4 or 5 of them to get you your first clients. So be able to pay $1 million to $1.5 million of salaries just to salespeople, because without it, you'll have no revenue. In addition to this, you're going to need cloud engineers, you're going to need software developers, you're going to need DevOps engineers. So plan on having a few $1 million available for you to create your team initially to get that stuff done, to build your brand and create marketing. Or you could go increase your business acumen skill, a couple years later, earn $500,000 a year and have a great architect job and not have any of the worries or the headaches. So it's not how many years, it's going to be how many contacts you have. When you have enough people that you can call on your phone and you can say, it's Mike Gibbs, I started my own architecture consulting firm. We're working with clients in this industry. Do you need any help? And they're like, Mike, I remember you helped me 10 years ago. You took this problem and you solved it. Yeah, sure. I'll talk to this. And you know what? My buddy needs some help too. So there's that. So it's not how many years it's going to be. It's how good your contact list is. And let's talk about the difference between a LinkedIn contact list versus a real network and contact list. A real network is this. I can call Andrea, and you saw and she's now living in Oregon. She was in California, and I can ask her a question, and she'd jump on an airplane tomorrow and come talk to me. She's my friend. She's a peer that I've worked with. That's a real relationship. A LinkedIn relationship is someone that clicked on your profile that you don't know. So the better your relationships, and your network is your net worth. If it's a real network, 100,000 LinkedIn contacts that don't care about you is not a real network. 500 contacts on LinkedIn that know you, love you, and are in a position of power that will help you is a real network. So when you feel that you have enough people that you can close deals, and you have enough capital or can get enough of a loan to hire the people that you need to start a company, you will be successful. But the question is, the average principal architect at Google earns $508,000 a year with a pay range of $394 to $709. The average principal architect at Microsoft and Google earn about $380 a year with a pay range of $300 to $500. I was a principal architect in less than 2 years. Would you rather do that and then potentially do some consulting on the side at $1,000 an hour or $1,200 an hour like I would do, which you can do, or do you really want to go to the effort to try and create a business, try to create a sales team, try to create an architecture team? Because remember, you're not going to be designing an architecture by yourself. You're going to need a half a dozen architects for a minimum for anything. You're going to need someone like Mark for network expertise. You're going to need someone big on security. You're going to need someone that knows AI. You're going to need someone that knows IAM. You're going to need someone that knows data to really be beneficial and help your clients. So I'd say get a really good job first, build a contact list. And when you've got a following like that, it'll cost you almost nothing to build the business by comparison. Whereas if you were trying to do it from scratch, you got to create an audience. You got to build a name. You got to build a brand. You need a team of publicists. You're going to need a team of advertisers. You're going to need a team of writers and marketing people. So think about that. Because here's why. You have to not only compete with Amazon, Microsoft, Cisco, Google, IBM. You've got to keep up. You got to compete with Accenture, Deloitte, KPMG, Capgemini, PricewaterhouseCoopers. And they can spend $1 million to get a deal. And they do. They do. I, with one client, spent $100,000 on lunches, dinners, and drinks one year just to build a relationship. It wasn't my money, thankfully. It was the company's money, and they were totally happy for me to spend it because I brought in $40 million at the end of that time, which is a whole lot more than the $100,000 that I bought on good scotch, steaks, lobsters, sporting events, etc. for entertaining a client. That's the secret downside that people don't know. So I hope I answered your question.
All right, let's take a look at the next question from Sagi. They ask, thank you. Your answers are golden. Yeah, I told you, Mike, golden nuggets. Thank you for that, by the way, Sagi. It says, I come from the fintech niche, specifically distributed solutions for large-scale transactions of file processing and cross-region latency reduction. Is it targetable?
So, you come from a fintech niche. I'll tell you how I see fintech, Sagi, and I'll also tell you that there is a place for you and what you could do. When you answered your initial question, it didn't feel like you came from an architecture background. It felt more tech related. And now that I got the fintech, it's good. So think of it this way. My perspective of fintech is if the architects did their job right in the first place, the cost would be optimized. We wouldn't have to go back and fix things. Why are things such a disaster? And you have a very valuable skill, so I'm going to teach you how to use it in a minute. Things are a disaster because people didn't understand what the cloud was. They didn't understand that you could buy a server from Dell for $300,000 and it was going to cost them $6 million on average to run that in the AWS cloud over the course of 4 years. Now, for someone that ran the right calculations and said, okay, we can reduce our staff by this because it's simpler in the cloud, we can reduce this, they had to build a business case. I'm going to agree with David Lithicum's current assessment because it's what I've seen, that cloud computing typically costs 250% more than it would do the equivalent thing in the data center. So, if it was architected right, we wouldn't have as many of these cost overruns. But Sagi, if you're working in fintech, and we can tell you that most cloud architectures are disasters, 70% of architectures fail to drive any transformation. And most of these cloud architectures, it was almost like they took a certification and they got excited about what was in the certification and they pushed the tech without even knowing what it was or its impact on the business. So fintech comes here to the rescue. Do you know how many organizations, Saji, that actually need fintech consulting? That actually need cost optimization consulting? That have overspent? That is your skill. What lessons have you learned, Sagi, about optimizing costs? What processes have you learned to optimize cost? What challenges have you solved that what optimize cost, and what did you reduce it? That's your skill. That's what I would do. Reducing recent latency, that's a basic networking thing. And a good architect would know how to do that and know that easily. Even a network engineer would do it. But knowing how to optimize costs, ooh, that's something that most people don't know. And even great architects like me, we focus less on the cost and more on the value we provide for our clients. So I typically in an architecture would also go to a FinOps person and say, any best practices or ideas that you have here that can keep this optimized? So I would say, if you're in the fintech niche, exploit it, capitalize on it. It's a very big thing. How would I do that? I would continue to improve my business acumen. And by doing so, you'll be able to better understand the business problems organizations have and design better fintech solutions for them. There, I could see you doing your own consulting. If you wanted to go into the architecture world and consult on that, if you've not been an architect before and all you've been is an engineer, I would ask you, do you know how to design business processes? Do you know how to understand an organization's financial and performance? Can you look at a balance sheet and financial statement and see where their weaknesses are? Can you evaluate the weaknesses in their people, their processes, and technology, and create a strategy to optimize their business around that? If you can't, architecture is not your core competency, and fintech is. And guess what? That may be something deeply, deeply, deeply needed. And if you've got some skill in there, there's going to be a good opportunity for it. And that's going to be a much easier niche to consult on. Because to start an architecture business, you're going to need architects. So even for me, if I design an architecture or David Lithicum, I asked him the other day, and because he came to one of my classes with my students, and I said, my students know how many people I would take. So I said, David, how many people that it typically takes, and how long does a typical architecture for you take? And he says, typically 15 to 50 people, and it takes 6 months to a year. And I said, my student said, that's what Mike told me. So understand that if you're going to design a valuable architecture, you're going to need a lot of architects. If you're in fintech, you already know. You don't need an architecture team. It'll be much easier for you to sell. So I would probably do that if I was going to start my own business. And if I wanted to work as an architect or create my own architecture firm, it's an option. I would go out there and work as an architect. I'd meet a whole bunch of people in the C-suite. I would attend every conference I possibly could. I would speak to executives. I'd build a network. I'd write thought leadership documents, present at conferences, and show yourself as a leader. And you can build it. You really can. And if I look at the number of how much I had to travel each year at any of these companies, they had me travel 200,000-300,000 miles a year to give these kind of presentations to drive demand for the company. That's what it takes to pull demand. Think about that. Can you afford the time and the money of flying 300,000 miles a year and investing in what it takes to get an architecture client and then building the team to support you? But I bet you know fintech already. You could probably sell yourself as a fintech expert. And then as you're doing that, gradually you could add other fintech professionals and then other salespeople. I think you have a good opportunity there.
All right, fantastic. Thank you very much for that question, Sagi. We appreciate it. From Malek, I have an AWS solution architect and a DVA certification, and now I'm attending a professional certification course on Coursera for AWS Cloud Technology Consulting. Is that enough for an entry-level cloud consultant role?
Malik, the fact that you said AWS Technology Consulting immediately means no. There is never an environment that's going to be all AWS. Well, almost never. I can tell you, if you want to be a consultant, that developer associate is exactly the opposite of what you need. And I can tell you, I've had a lot of people that came to me with a sysops, DevOps, and a developer associate, and they went on 10 architecture interviews and nobody took them seriously. And we removed that from them. So here's the thing. You need to understand, first figure out what you want to do. So there is no such job called cloud technology consulting. None, zero. So I don't know what that even is. Now, there are architects that consult on system design. There are engineers that consult on performance tuning and optimization, for example. There are security consultants that cloud security that focus on security architecture design. There are security consultants that are called penetration testers that break in. There are DevOps consultants that focus on DevOps processes. So anytime you have one course that covers it all, it doesn't cover anything. And that's why we have to retrain people that come out of these programs every single day. So what you need to do, Malik, is find the career you want. You want to be an architect. You need to get your CXO relevancy, your leadership skills, your sales skills, your presentation skills, your executive presence. And you need to present and be coached on how to do it. You need to understand your business process, re-engineering, and all these wonderful things. And then you need to understand all of the network and the data center, not the AWS stuff. Why? Why say not the AWS stuff? 98% of organizations use multi-cloud. Even if you design something simply on AWS, you're not going to be using AWS security services most likely. You'll use some from Cisco, Palo Alto, Fortinet. You're going to use some big data things from other vendors. It's going to be a conglomeration of hundreds of vendors potentially in your architecture. And they're not AWS anything. They're systems that run on AWS, Azure, Google, this. So the answer is no, it will not be enough for any job. So you have to figure out, do you want an engineering job? Do you want an architect job? Do you want a sales job? Do you want to get a program management job, etc., and then train for those skills? Imagine a course that said, I can train you to fly an airplane, be a lawyer, be a physician, and at the same time turn you into an electrical engineer all in one course. That's what this kind of thing is describing. It's not something that's going to get you there. But I'd say figure it out. You want to be an architect? Take all those things plus network, data center, design skills, and come join us on that completely free How to Get Your First Cloud Architect Job webinar. Now, Malik, you want to be an engineer? Guess what? Again, none of that stuff's going to be relevant. You need to have knowledge, if you want to be a cloud engineer, Linux, Python, Linux scripting, Windows scripting, Linux administration, Windows administration, Terraform, and then really good knowledge on the CLIs and the management consoles of multiple clouds. Again, it's not going to be in an AWS or an Azure or anything. Now, you wanted to be a DevOps engineer. It's another set of skills. So the biggest problem I have, Malik, when people getting hired is they think they can learn 10 different jobs in the same course. But you can't. So I'm going to have Mark actually add a little bit to this because Mark is an expert on technology and technology careers as well. And he, like me, has to reteach people that have done these types of training in the past and get them hired.
Yeah, so Malik, I like focus. I like direction, as we mentioned before. A lot of the things that you see out in the industry, they try to spread you too thin, especially too fast or too quickly. So what you have to do is, and this goes for any type of IT-related field, you can even span it outside of IT, focus on the foundations of these things. The AWS certifications, the Azure certifications, the Oracle, the Google Cloud, these are not foundational certifications when it comes to the technology. They are foundational when it comes to the actual services that these cloud service providers do rent you, okay? So that's how you have to keep it in mind. So instead of looking at taking this Coursera course, this Udemy course or something, think of it that you want to build foundational knowledge for those particular roles. Now, and I'm going to say this plainly because I've seen this, I come from a networking background. I've seen people try to learn networking, security, scripting, and then on top of that, administration. All different jobs, every single job. No matter how much big companies like Cisco, Juniper, Arista, they try to push automation on you, realistically speaking, These are different roles, and they require specific people to even manage them. Between Mike and I, we have plenty of experience. The experience is still different, and yet we still can't figure out and do everything that is required by ourselves for a business. That's where teams come in. So I would suggest, instead of running yourself ragged, running yourself thin, or spreading yourself thin because of the pressure other people apply to you, focus on a direction. If you like, come with us on Thursday. We'll discuss this a little bit more in detail. But I can tell you from my personal experience, do not listen to those people that sell certifications and that simply try to get you to buy their services. You don't want to listen to that. This is your life. This is your career. Have some strategy. Have a goal in mind. Then reverse engineer that goal, and then you'll know what skills you need to acquire. And guess what? They're not going to be 6, 7, 8 different professions that you're going to have to acquire, not to be successful. Don't do yourself that disservice, okay? Please. And if you can, we'll talk a little bit more on Thursday about it, to what you can do to potentially provide yourself with a higher probability of success when it comes to your actual IT career.
I'm going to invite everyone to How to Get Your First Cloud Job webinar on Thursday, and I can only go to 4:30. So Tyrone, I'm going to take one last question, but I'm going to do it relatively quickly.
All right, go ahead. A question from Isaac Olayemi. It says, I just stormed on Cloud Architect today, and I've watched a couple of YouTube videos from Mike. Would like to take a course on Udemy. Do I need to have solid information on programming before this?
Isaac, first, we can probably offer you for free what you'd get on Udemy, but 100 times better. So I'm happy to do so, because we provide a lot of certification trainings. We've got an Azure Solutions Architect Expert one coming up and a security one coming up. And it'll be a lot deeper than anything you'd find there. But I don't know what job you want, Isaac. So join us on the How to Get Your First Cloud Job webinar. I asked you in the chat box and didn't get a response, because I don't know what you want to be. You want to be an architect, you don't need to code. You want to be a cloud engineer, you sure do. So we need to know your actual job that you desire. So I don't have that information, and you didn't provide it in the chat box, but you let us know. Come join us on the How to Get Your First Cloud Job webinar, and they're there. I actually see one more from Raz 7 that I'm going to get to, which is regards to initial salaries. I can answer that pretty quickly.
Yeah. If you don't mind, Mike,
So,
I just want to add something for Isaac really quickly.
Okay.
Do me a favor, Isaac. Now, we are a little biased towards the architecture career just because we think it's a very valuable and very fulfilling career. But go through the videos on the actual channel of ours, because you'll get a good understanding of the different roles and what they entail. And because you're starting off, stick within the research phase first. Understand the different type of jobs that are out there, then decide on how you're going to approach your training. Just wanted to put that out there, just to help you out a little bit. I know it's confusing, especially in the tech world out there.
Yeah.
Right. Let's go to the next question from Raz. He says, could you provide a ballpark realistic expectation salary for architect roles you've placed people in previously?
Yes, absolutely. So Raz 7, what's going to determine the architect salary is their executive presence, their communication skills, their leadership skills, their business acumen, and their competency. I can tell you, last year I placed someone over at Google for $409,000 a year. I can tell you that for people that have a tech background, we're typically talking between $250 and $300. Now let's talk about the people that never worked in technology. I'm thinking about a person I spoke to 2 days ago who got $170,000 for his first architect job. I'm thinking about a woman who got $160,000 for her first architect job, another $170,000 from a sales rep that went and got a good solutions architect job as their first job. So I'd say between $150 and $200, but I'd say between $160 and $170 is the average first-time cloud architect salary of people that we've actually trained. I've got some anomalies that are high. I also had a student that honestly didn't need to do this. It was selling cosmetics. And while he was taking our training, somebody reached out to him and said, I have an associate architect position for you, which is a trainee position, and we'll pay you $70,000 a year while you're in training. And when you're done, we'll pay you $130,000 a year. And he said, wait, instead of finishing Mike's course, I've been here for a couple of months. They're going to pay me $70,000 a year to be trained and then guarantee me a job at 130 plus bonus when I'm done. And he said, I'll do it. So that's the low anomaly we have. But you know what? If he got paid, money to actually finish his training, and then he was guaranteed a 130 base with a 20% bonus salary, which is still that 170 in the end, wasn't a bad idea. Missed that guy. Really liked working with him. He was a great person. So still is. So I have to check in with him. So I wish I could do more, but I had to. We ran actually 33 minutes late today. But if you come back, we'll happily answer your questions. Join us tomorrow on the How to Get Your First Cloud Architect Job webinar. We'll go over the role, what we do, the skills you need, and everything to make sure that you can get a great cloud architect job whether you train with us or not. At the end of this month, we're going to do a new AWS Solutions Architect Associate Bootcamp. It will be free. We will teach, then we will ask questions. It's about 3 times the content we normally did because we put a lot of the AWS networking, AWS security, and new AWS AI features in there. Plus, normally we're focused on just architects, and we added other careers. We have a lot more labs and things. So it's going to be real fun. I'm going to get geeky, which I don't get to do. I'm going to bring some other people to get geeky with me to make sure it's a good experience for all. So register for that. Again, it's free. So join us there. And there's a tremendous number of free documents in the description of this video and resources to help you with your interview. So please take advantage of some of the free things. Mark, thank you for sharing your expertise with our audience today.
My pleasure.
Tyrone, thank you for all you're doing behind the scenes, and everyone take care. If you've enjoyed the video, please give it a like, please subscribe, and hit the bell to be notified of new free things we have for your cloud computing career, or AI career, or your security career, or networking career. Take care.